Lucas Hale had 30 seconds to make a choice that would either save his family's future or destroy it forever. Standing at that crosswalk, watching a young woman collapse to the pavement while pedestrians stepped around her like she was nothing more than an obstacle, he knew with brutal clarity that whatever he decided in the next heartbeat would define the rest of his life. The job interview that could pull him and his daughter out of poverty was 4 blocks away. He was already cutting it close. But the woman's eyes, desperate, frightened, struggling to focus, locked onto his. And Lucas felt the world slow to a terrible, crystalline moment of truth. Before we dive into this story about sacrifice, second chances, and the unexpected ways our smallest choices can reshape our entire world, I want to invite you to stay with me until the very end. Drop a comment below telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel and connecting with all of you. And if this story moves you, hit that like button. It genuinely helps me continue bringing you these narratives every week. Now let me tell you about the day Lucas Hale learned that sometimes losing everything is the only way to gain what truly matters. The morning had started with promise, which should have been Lucas's first warning. In his experience, hope was usually just a setup for disappointment. "Daddy, you look fancy." Maya stood in the doorway of their cramped bathroom, clutching the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 2. At 7 years old, she was small for her age, something the pediatrician had mentioned with concern during their last visit, the one Lucas had barely been able to afford even with the community clinic's sliding scale fees. Her dark hair stuck up in the back, and her pajamas were getting too short at the ankles. He'd need to find her new ones soon, maybe at the thrift store on Morrison Street. Lucas adjusted his tie, the only tie he owned, and tried to make his smile reach his eyes. "Big interview today, sweetheart, remember? The one that's going to make everything better?" Maya's voice carried that particular quality of childhood hope that simultaneously broke and mended his heart. "That's the one." He crouched down to her level, ignoring the protest from his knees. 3 years of working double shifts doing manual labor had left their mark on his 32-year-old body. "Mrs. Chen is going to pick you up from school today and keep you until I get back, okay? It might be a little later than usual." Maya's face fell slightly. She hated when he worked late, hated the parade of neighbors and friends who cycled through babysitting duties because Lucas couldn't afford consistent childcare. He hated it too. Hated the charity of it, the way it made him feel like he was failing at the most basic requirement of fatherhood. "But you'll come get me for bedtime?" she asked, her small hand finding his. "Always." He kissed her forehead, breathing in the scent of the discount shampoo he'd watered down to make it last longer. "I promise." The promise hung in the air between them, weighted with all the other promises he'd made and kept through sheer force of will over the past 3 years. Since the accident that had taken his wife Sarah and left him a widowed single father at 29. Since the medical bills from her final week in the hospital had devoured their savings and forced them out of their small house and into this 2-room apartment in the cheapest part of the city. Since he'd cobbled together a life from temp jobs, night shifts, and whatever work he could find that would still let him be present for his daughter. This interview was supposed to change all of that. The position at Sterling & Associates was entry-level, administrative coordinator in their operations department, but it came with benefits, real benefits. Health insurance that would cover Maya's dental work, the cavities he'd been putting off because the dentist wanted $800 he didn't have. A salary that would let them move somewhere safer, somewhere Maya could play outside without Lucas constantly watching for broken glass, and worse. Stability, security, a future that looked like something more than just survival. Lucas had applied on a whim, not really believing he had a shot. His resume was a patchwork of short-term positions, nothing that screamed promising candidate. His associate's degree from the community college felt almost quaint compared to what he imagined other applicants brought to the table. But then he'd gotten the call, and the woman on the phone had sounded genuinely interested in his application, and suddenly this impossible thing had felt possible. He'd researched the company obsessively. Sterling & Associates was a mid-sized consulting firm with an excellent reputation and a corporate culture that emphasized growth from within. People who started in entry-level positions didn't stay there. If they worked hard, if they proved themselves, opportunities opened up. Lucas knew how to work hard. It was the only thing he'd ever really been good at. The morning commute took 2 buses and 45 minutes. Lucas had timed it 3 times over the past week, mapping out every variable, every potential delay. He'd built in a 30-minute buffer. He was not going to be late. This was too important. The city moved around him in its usual chaotic rhythm. July heat shimmered off the pavement, making the air feel thick and hostile. Lucas's dress shirt, purchased specifically for this interview from a discount store, was already beginning to stick to his back. He'd debated whether to wear the jacket that completed his only suit, ultimately deciding that showing up sweaty would be worse than looking slightly underdressed. The first bus arrived exactly on schedule. Lucas found a seat near the back and pulled out his phone, reviewing the notes he'd made about the company. Revenue growth, recent expansions, key leadership changes. He'd memorized it all. When the interviewer asked why he wanted to work at Sterling & Associates, he'd be ready. He'd be perfect. "This your first time interviewing there?" Lucas looked up to find an older woman in the seat across from him, her kind face creased with curiosity. "That obvious?" he asked, managing a rueful smile. "You've got that look?" "Same one my son had when he interviewed for his teaching position." She nodded at the folder in his lap, the one containing extra copies of his resume. "You'll do fine. I can tell. You've got an honest face." The comment caught Lucas off guard. "Thank you. I hope you're right." "Mother's intuition," she said with a wink, "never fails." Lucas wanted to believe her. He needed to believe that something about him communicated competence and reliability, that the hiring manager would see past his fragmented work history to the person underneath, someone who showed up, who delivered, who would treat this opportunity like the lifeline it was. The bus delivered him to the transfer point with 5 minutes to spare. The second bus was running 2 minutes behind, which still left him comfortable margin. Everything was going according to plan, which was when his phone rang. Maya's school. His stomach dropped even before he answered. "Mr. Hale, this is Nurse Patterson from Riverside Elementary." "Is Maya okay?" The question came out more sharply than he intended. She's fine," the nurse assured him quickly. "Just a little incident on the playground. She scraped her knee pretty badly and she's asking for you. I don't think it needs stitches, but she's quite upset." Lucas closed his eyes, calculating. 20 minutes to the school, 20 minutes back, plus however long it took to calm Maya down. He'd lose his buffer completely. Might even be late. "Can I talk to her?" he asked. A rustling sound, and then Maya's tear-choked voice. "Daddy?" "Hey, sweetheart, Nurse Patterson says you took a tumble. It hurts." She was crying in earnest now, the way she only did when she was genuinely frightened. "I want you to come." Every instinct in Lucas's body screamed at him to go to her, but the rational part of his mind, the part that had kept them afloat for 3 years, knew that this interview could change their lives, could mean better schools for Maya, better health care, better everything. "Baby, I know it's scary, but Nurse Patterson is going to take excellent care of you. She's going to clean it up and put a bandage on it, and it's going to feel so much better." "But I want you." Her voice broke, and Lucas felt something crack in his chest. I know you do, and I want to be there." He swallowed hard. "But this interview, Maya, it's really important. It's going to help us, help you. Can you be brave for me? Just for a little while?" The silence on the other end felt like judgment. Finally, Maya sniffled. "Okay, that's my girl. I'll come straight to school after the interview, and we'll get ice cream on the way home. The good kind, with the chocolate chips you like. Promise?" "Promise." When the nurse came back on the line, Lucas gave her permission to treat the scrape and hung up, feeling like the worst father in the world. The second bus arrived, and he boarded it in a daze, trying to shake off the guilt. The interview was at 2 o'clock. It was currently 1:15. He was fine. Everything was fine. The bus lurched through midday traffic, hitting every red light as if the universe was testing his resolve. Lucas forced himself to breathe slowly, to review his talking points, to focus on the opportunity ahead rather than the small voice in his head that kept replaying Maya's tears. By the time he stepped off the bus at 1:40, his shirt was soaked through with sweat and his nerves felt stripped raw. The Sterling & Associates building rose before him, all glass and steel and corporate promise. Lucas straightened his tie, wiped his palms on his pants, and started walking. 3 blocks. He had 20 minutes. Plenty of time. The crosswalk signal turned red just as he approached the intersection at the second block. Lucas stopped, using the moment to check his reflection in a store window. Presentable. Professional. Like someone who had their life together. That was when he saw her. At first, she was just another pedestrian waiting for the light to change. A young woman in professional attire. Her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her expression distant and strained. But as Lucas watched, her posture shifted. She wavered, one hand reaching out as if searching for something to steady herself. The light changed. The crowd surged forward into the crosswalk. The young woman took 2 steps and collapsed. It happened so quickly that most people didn't even register it. Those who did simply moved around her, a river of humanity parting around an obstacle. Someone muttered something about day drinking. Someone else laughed. Lucas stood frozen at the curb, watching this woman sprawled on the blistering pavement, clearly in distress, clearly needing help. The interview was 2 blocks away. 15 minutes. He looked up at the Sterling and Associates building, visible now above the lower structures, its windows reflecting the afternoon sun. He looked back at the woman. She was trying to push herself up, her movements uncoordinated and weak. As he watched, she lifted her head and her eyes, wide with confusion and fear, found his. The moment stretched and crystallized. Lucas could feel his future branching into 2 distinct paths, could sense with absolute certainty that whatever choice he made in the next 5 seconds would alter the fundamental trajectory of his life. Every rational calculation said to keep walking. She was probably fine. Someone else would help. He had his daughter to think about, his future to secure. This interview was everything. But those eyes. The desperate, frightened plea in them. Lucas had made a lot of hard choices in his life. He'd chosen to marry Sarah even though everyone said they were too young. He'd chosen to keep going after she died, even when the grief felt like it would crush him. He'd chosen every single day for 3 years to show up for Maya no matter how tired he was, no matter how hopeless things seemed. He'd never chosen his own comfort over someone else's crisis. He couldn't start now. Lucas crossed the street at a run. Hey, it's okay. I've got you. He knelt beside her, one hand supporting her shoulder. Up close, he could see she was young, mid-20s maybe, and clearly unwell. Her skin was clammy, her breathing shallow. Can you tell me your name? Emily. The word came out slurred. Something's wrong. Okay, Emily. My name's Lucas. We're going to get you out of this intersection, all right? He glanced up to see the light was about to change again, traffic already revving their engines. Can you stand if I help you? I think so. He got an arm around her waist and hauled her upright, supporting most of her weight as he half-carried her to the sidewalk. A few people glanced their way, but no one stopped. Lucas maneuvered her to a bench in the shade of a bus shelter and helped her sit. When did you last eat? He asked, already pulling out his phone to call 911. No ambulance. Emily grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. Please. I got dizzy. The heat. I haven't been sleeping well. You collapsed in the middle of a crosswalk. I know it looks bad. She was breathing more steadily now, color returning to her face. But I promise, I'm okay. I just need to sit for a minute. Lucas studied her, trying to assess whether she was genuinely recovering or just convincing herself she was fine. He'd seen Sarah do the same thing in the weeks before the accident, downplaying symptoms that turned out to be catastrophic. At least let me get you some water, he said. There was a convenience store half a block down. Lucas jogged there, acutely aware that every minute was eating into his interview window. He grabbed the coldest water bottle from the cooler and paid with bills from the emergency cash he kept in his wallet, money that was supposed to last them through the end of the week. When he returned, Emily had her head between her knees, breathing deeply. Here. He twisted the cap off and pressed the bottle into her hand. Small sips. She drank gratefully, and they sat in silence for a moment, watching the city move around them with indifferent haste. You don't have to stay, Emily said finally. I'm sure you have somewhere to be. Lucas checked his watch. 1:58. The Sterling and Associates building was still 2 blocks away. It's fine, he heard himself say. It's not fine. I saw your face when I grabbed your wrist. You're going to be late for something important. Not as important as making sure you're okay. Emily turned to look at him fully for the first time, really seeing him. That's a kind lie. It's not a lie. Lucas wasn't entirely sure that was true, but he committed to it anyway. What kind of person would I be if I left you here? A practical one. But there was something in her expression, gratitude mixed with a bone-deep weariness that Lucas recognized from his own mirror. What's your name again? Lucas. Lucas Hale. Well, Lucas Hale, you're either the best person I've met in this city or the worst judge of your own self-interest. She took another sip of water. Maybe both. Despite everything, Lucas smiled. That's probably fair. They sat there as the minutes ticked past 2 o'clock. Emily's breathing continued to steady, her color improving with each passing moment. Lucas found himself studying the way people moved through the city, each absorbed in their own trajectory, their own urgencies. How easy it would have been to be one of them. How tempting. You want to tell me what's really going on? He asked. Emily was quiet for a long moment. You ever feel like you're drowning, but everyone around you thinks you're swimming just fine? Yeah, Lucas said softly. Yeah, I know that feeling. I haven't slept more than 3 hours a night in weeks. I'm working 16-hour days trying to prove something I'm not even sure I believe anymore. And today She gestured helplessly. My body decided it was done, I guess. What are you trying to prove? That I earned my position. That I'm not just there because of who my father is. Emily laughed, a bitter sound. Ironic, right? Most people would kill for the advantages I have, and I'm literally killing myself trying to prove I don't need them. Lucas thought about the interview he was missing, about the opportunity that had felt like his only chance at a better life. Sounds lonely. It is. Emily met his eyes. Which is probably why I'm telling all this to a complete stranger who saved me from getting run over. Happy to listen, Lucas said. And he meant it, even though his phone now read 2:15 and he knew, with sick certainty, that his interview window had closed. They talked for another 20 minutes. Emily told him about the pressure of living up to impossible expectations, about a father whose love felt conditional on achievement, about the exhaustion of maintaining a perfect facade. Lucas found himself sharing pieces of his own story. Maya, the accident, the long climb from grief toward something like hope. When Emily finally stood, steady on her feet, she looked at Lucas with an expression he couldn't quite read. You missed your interview, didn't you? There was no point lying. Yeah. God, I'm so sorry. Don't be. You needed help. That's what matters. That's not what matters to your daughter, though, or your bank account. Emily pulled out her phone. Let me at least call you a car to wherever you need to go. I'm fine. Bus works just as well. Lucas, her voice was firm. You gave up something important to help me. Let me do this one small thing. Pride warred with practicality. Practicality won, barely. Okay, thank you. The car arrived within minutes, one of those sleek black sedans that Lucas had only ever seen from the outside. Emily held the door open for him. I mean it, she said. Thank you for stopping, for staying, she gestured vaguely, for treating me like a person instead of a problem. Take care of yourself, Lucas said. Really take care of yourself. The world needs people who are willing to stop and help. Can't do that if you work yourself into the ground. Emily smiled, sad and knowing, right back at you. As the car pulled away, Lucas gave the driver the address of Maya's school. He'd meant what he said about ice cream. A promise was a promise, even if he could barely afford it now. Especially because he could barely afford it now. His phone buzzed with the notification. An email from Sterling and Associates. Dear Mr. Hale, we regret to inform you that due to your absence from today's scheduled interview, we have moved forward with other candidates. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. Lucas read it twice, letting the words sink in. The finality of them. The door closing on the future he'd imagined. He should feel devastated, angry, something. Instead, he just felt tired. And underneath the exhaustion, something else. Something he didn't quite have words for yet. Not regret, exactly. Not quite peace, either. The certainty maybe that he'd made the only choice he could have lived with. The car glided through traffic toward Riverside Elementary, where his daughter waited with a scraped knee and the infinite faith that her father would always come when she needed him. Lucas leaned his head against the window and watched the city blur past, thinking about the woman he'd helped and the opportunity he'd lost and the strange, immutable fact that sometimes the most important decisions we make are the ones we never really think about at all. We just act. And then we live with the consequences. Maya was waiting in the nurse's office when he arrived, her knee sporting a large bandage decorated with cartoon bears. Her face lit up when she saw him, and she launched herself into his arms with enough force to nearly knock him over. "You came," she said into his shoulder. "I promised, didn't I?" Lucas held her tight, breathing in the scent of playground dust and childhood. "How's the knee, warrior?" "Hurts less now." She pulled back to look at him. "Did you get the job?" Lucas hesitated, then decided on the truth. "I didn't make it to the interview, sweetheart." "Why not?" "Someone needed help. I stopped to make sure they were okay." Maya considered this with the seriousness that children bring to moral questions. Was it the right thing to do? "I think so, yeah." "Then that's okay." She took his hand, complete confidence in her voice. "You'll get another chance." Lucas wished he had half her faith, but he smiled and nodded and thanked the nurse, and they walked out of the school into the brutal afternoon heat. "Ice cream?" Maya asked hopefully. "Ice cream," Lucas confirmed. They stopped at the corner store, the one with the good ice cream bars that cost twice what they should. Lucas bought 2, chocolate chip for Maya, plain vanilla for himself because it was cheaper, and they sat on the curb eating them while the city rushed past. "Daddy?" Maya's voice was small. "Yeah, sweetheart?" "I'm glad you helped that person, even if it meant missing your interview." She licked melting ice cream off her fingers. "That's what heroes do." Lucas felt something break open in his chest, some tight knot of anxiety and regret loosening just enough to let him breathe. "You know what? I'm glad too." And sitting there on that dirty curb with his daughter, sticky with ice cream and facing an uncertain future, Lucas realized he meant it. He'd lost an opportunity, but he'd kept something more important, the part of himself that would always choose compassion over convenience, that would stop for a stranger in crisis even when it cost him everything. The world needed people like that. Maya needed a father like that. He needed to be that person, more than he needed any job. The realization didn't make their circumstances any easier. They still lived in a cramped apartment. He still had to figure out where next month's rent was coming from. The bills weren't going away just because he'd done the right thing, but for the first time in a long time, Lucas felt something other than desperation driving him forward. He felt like himself. That night, after Maya was asleep, Lucas sat at their small kitchen table and opened his laptop. He needed to start job hunting again, needed to figure out the next move. But first, almost without thinking about it, he typed Emily Sterling and Associates into the search bar. The results loaded, and Lucas stared at the screen. Emily Carter, Assistant Director of Operations, Sterling and Associates, daughter of Richard Carter, CEO and founder. The woman he'd helped wasn't just some random professional having a bad day. She was the daughter of the man who would have been his boss, the daughter of the person who had ultimate authority over every hiring decision in the company. Lucas sat back, processing this information. Would it have changed anything if he'd known? Would he have stayed with her longer, been more solicitous, tried to leverage the moment into some kind of advantage? The thought made him feel vaguely ill. No, he'd helped her because she needed help. The rest didn't matter. But it was a strange coincidence. A small city, getting smaller. Lucas closed the laptop and went to bed, and dreamed of crosswalks and interviews and choices that echoed forward in ways he couldn't predict. He had no way of knowing that in a sleek office across town, Emily Carter was sitting at her desk at nearly midnight, reviewing security footage from the intersection where she'd collapsed, watching a man in a cheap suit stop when no one else would, watching him stay when he clearly needed to leave. She had asked security to identify him, and they'd found his interview appointment in the system, had cross-referenced it with his resume, his application, his entire professional history. Lucas Hale, single father, string of short-term jobs, associate's degree from the community college. Nothing that would normally make him stand out. everything that made him extraordinary. Emily made a note in her phone, then another in her calendar. She had an idea, but it would require her father's approval, and Richard Carter didn't make exceptions for people based on sentiment. She'd need to make the case carefully, strategically. But if there was one thing Emily had learned in her 25 years, it was how to get what she wanted. And right now, she wanted to find out if the man who'd stopped to help her was as remarkable as he seemed, or if she was just desperate enough to see heroism in a simple act of human decency. The days that followed had a particular quality of grayness that Lucas had come to associate with setbacks. Not the dramatic darkness of genuine crisis, but the flat, muted exhaustion of having to start over again from a position slightly worse than before. He spent Monday morning on the phone with temp agencies, his resume pulled up on the laptop screen while Maya watched cartoons in the next room. The apartment felt smaller than usual, the walls pressing in with the weight of bills that wouldn't wait and opportunities that had already passed. Mr. Hale, I'm looking at your file here, and I see you completed the warehouse assignment back in April. How did that go? The recruiter's voice was professionally pleasant, the kind of tone that managed to be both friendly and completely impersonal. Fine. Good. They offered to extend it, but the night shift schedule wasn't compatible with my daughter's school hours. Lucas had already explained this twice to two different people at the same agency, but he kept his voice patient. I'm looking for something with daytime hours, stable if possible. Of course, of course. The challenge is that most of our stable placements require more specialized skills or longer-term availability. A pause, the sound of typing. I do have a 2-week data entry position starting Wednesday. Pay is $14 an hour, downtown location. $14 an hour. Lucas did the math automatically. After taxes and bus fare, barely enough to cover their basic expenses. Nothing left over for Maya's dental work, or the security deposit on a better apartment, or any of the 1,000 small emergencies that constituted their normal life. I'll take it, he said. Excellent. I'll email you the details and the client contact information. And Mr. Hale, keep checking back with us. Things come up all the time. Lucas thanked her and hung up, staring at the ceiling and trying to summon something like optimism. 2 weeks of work. Then he'd be back to the same position, making these same calls, hoping for something better while settling for whatever came. The email from Sterling and Associates sat in his inbox like a small monument to what might have been. He should delete it, probably, move on. But something kept him from clicking the button, some stubborn part of his brain that wanted to remember the feeling of possibility, even if it had only lasted a few hours. Daddy, I'm hungry. Maya appeared in the doorway, her rabbit tucked under one arm. Lucas checked the time. Nearly noon, and he'd been so absorbed in job hunting that he'd forgotten about lunch. How about grilled cheese? With the good cheese or the regular cheese? The good cheese cost $3 more per package. Lucas had been stretching the regular cheese for 2 weeks now, rationing it carefully. Good cheese, he decided. Special occasion. What's the occasion? Monday. Monday's occasion enough. Maya giggled, the sound bright enough to cut through some of the grayness. Lucas pulled himself up from the table and headed to the kitchen, grateful for the distraction of a task he could actually complete successfully. They were halfway through lunch when his phone rang with an unknown number. Mr. Hale? This is Jennifer Walsh from Sterling and Associates. Lucas's hand tightened on the phone. Yes? I'm calling on behalf of our executive team. We'd like to invite you to come in for a meeting this Thursday at 10 a.m., if you're available. For a moment, Lucas couldn't process the words. A meeting, not an interview, but still. I'm sorry, I thought the email said you'd moved forward with other candidates. Yes, well, circumstances have changed. Are you available Thursday? Every instinct told Lucas this was strange. Companies didn't reach back out to candidates they'd already rejected, especially candidates who'd completely missed their scheduled interviews. But he wasn't in a position to question good fortune, however unexpected. Yes, I'm available. Wonderful. I'll send you a confirmation email with the details. We're looking forward to meeting you, Mr. Hale. After she hung up, Lucas sat staring at his half-eaten sandwich, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Maya watched him with curious eyes. Who was that? Remember the job interview I missed? The one where I stopped to help someone? Uh-huh. They want to meet with me after all. Maya's face split into a grin. See? I told you you'd get another chance. Lucas reached over and ruffled her hair, marveling at her uncomplicated faith in cosmic justice. You did say that, didn't you? The confirmation email arrived minutes later, and Lucas read it 3 times, looking for some catch or condition he'd missed. But it was straightforward. Thursday, 10 a.m., ask for Jennifer Walsh at the reception desk. He'd be meeting with the executive team, which seemed like overkill for an entry-level administrative position. But maybe that was just how Sterling and Associates operated. The rest of Monday and all of Tuesday passed in a fog of anticipation and anxiety. Lucas researched the company again, memorized new details, practiced answers to potential questions. He picked up the 2-week data entry position on Wednesday as a backup plan, spending 8 hours inputting spreadsheet data in a windowless office while trying not to obsess about Thursday's meeting. Wednesday night, he laid out his suit and went over his notes one more time. Maya had already gone to bed, exhausted from a full day of summer camp that Lucas was paying for with money he didn't really have. He'd justified the expense by telling himself she needed the structure, the social interaction with other kids. The truth was, he needed her to be occupied and happy while he tried to hold their lives together with increasingly frayed thread. Sleep didn't come easily. Lucas lay in the darkness of their small bedroom, listening to Maya's steady breathing from her bed across the room, and wondered what tomorrow would bring. Second chances were rare enough in his experience that he didn't quite trust them. But he'd learned a long time ago that you didn't refuse opportunities just because you didn't understand them. You showed up, you did your best, you dealt with whatever came next. Thursday morning arrived with the same oppressive heat that had characterized the entire summer. Lucas dressed carefully, double-checked his appearance, and arranged for Mrs. Chen to pick Maya up from camp. He allowed himself an extra 30 minutes of buffer time, determined not to let anything derail him today. The bus ride felt longer than it should have, every red light a personal affront. But Lucas arrived at the Sterling and Associates building at 9:40, sweating through his shirt, but present and accounted for. The lobby was exactly as impressive as he remembered from his research photos, all marble and steel and carefully curated modern art that probably cost more than Lucas made in a year. I'm here to see Jennifer Walsh, he told the receptionist, a polished woman in her 30s who looked like she'd never had a hair out of place in her life. Lucas Hale, I have a 10 o'clock. She typed something into her computer, smiled professionally. Mr. Hale, yes. Miss Walsh will be right down. Please have a seat. The waiting area featured chairs that were somehow both beautiful and uncomfortable, clearly designed for aesthetics rather than actual human use. Lucas perched on the edge of one, his folder of resume copies resting on his knees, and tried to project an air of calm competence. He'd been sitting there for maybe 3 minutes when the elevator opened and 2 people emerged. The first was a woman in her 40s, black hair cut in a sharp bob, wearing a suit that screamed executive authority. The second was Emily. Lucas stood without thinking, his brain struggling to catch up with what he was seeing. Emily looked different than she had on the crosswalk, healthier, more composed, her professional armor firmly in place, but her eyes held the same tired wariness he'd seen when she'd collapsed. Those eyes went wide when they landed on him. Mr. Hale? The older woman extended her hand. I'm Jennifer Walsh, Chief Operating Officer. Thank you for coming in today. Lucas shook her hand, acutely aware that Emily was staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Thank you for the invitation. I believe you've already met our Assistant Director of Operations, Emily Carter. We've met, Emily said quietly. Hello, Lucas. Emily. He nodded, trying to keep his confusion off his face. This was the meeting? With the COO and the woman he'd helped? Jennifer glanced between them with sharp intelligence. Why don't we head upstairs where we can talk more comfortably? Mr. Hale, can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? Water would be great, thank you. They rode the elevator to the 7th floor in silence that felt heavy with unasked questions. Lucas kept his eyes forward, hyper-aware of Emily standing just to his left. What was happening here? Had she requested this meeting? Was this some kind of elaborate thank you for helping her, or something else entirely? The conference room they entered was designed to intimidate, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a table that could easily seat 20 people, abstract art that Lucas suspected was probably famous if you knew anything about art. Jennifer gestured to a chair, and Lucas sat, accepting the water bottle an assistant materialized with. "I'm sure you're wondering why we asked you here," Jennifer began, settling into the chair across from him. Emily took the seat beside her, her expression carefully neutral. "Especially after the circumstances of last Friday." "The question had crossed my mind," Lucas admitted. Jennifer smiled. "I appreciate directness, Mr. Hale, so let me be direct with you. Emily came to me earlier this week with an unusual request. She asked me to review your application file personally and to arrange this meeting." Lucas looked at Emily, who met his gaze steadily. "After what happened on Friday," Emily said, "I was curious about the man who stopped to help me. Security footage helped us identify you, and we found your interview appointment in our system. When I saw that you'd been rejected for missing the interview, missing it because you were helping me, I felt I owed you at least a conversation." "You don't owe me anything," Lucas said. "You needed help. That's all that mattered." That's exactly the response that made me want to have this conversation. Emily leaned forward slightly. "Lucas, I've worked in corporate environments my entire adult life. I've seen how people operate when they think someone might be useful to them, and I've seen how they operate when they think someone is irrelevant. Do you know how many people walked past me that day? How many saw me on the ground and decided I wasn't their problem?" "Too many," Lucas said quietly. "Every single person except you." Emily's voice carried an intensity that made Lucas sit back slightly. "And when you did stop, you didn't ask my name, didn't ask where I worked, didn't try to network or leverage the situation. You just helped, and then you left. Anyone would have done the same. But they didn't," Jennifer cut in, her tone matter of fact. "That's the point, Mr. Hale. They didn't. You did. And while I'll admit that Emily's personal interest in your application is what brought you to my attention, what kept my attention was your actual resume." Lucas blinked. "My resume? It's not exactly impressive." "It's not traditional," Jennifer corrected. "But traditional isn't always what we need. I see someone who's held 7 different positions in 3 years but never quit a single one until the contract ended or circumstances forced a change. I see someone who completed an associate's degree while working full-time and raising a child alone. I see adaptability, resilience, and work ethic. Those qualities are harder to find than you might think." "What Jennifer's trying to say," Emily added, "is that we'd like to offer you a position, not the one you originally applied for, but something we think might be a better fit." Lucas felt like the conversation had jumped ahead without him. "I don't understand." Jennifer slid a folder across the table. "We have an opening in our operations department for a program coordinator. It's a step above the administrative role you applied for with corresponding salary and benefits. The position requires someone who can manage multiple priorities, communicate effectively across departments, and problem solve on the fly. Based on your work history and what Emily observed last Friday, we believe you'd excel at it." Lucas opened the folder with hands that weren't quite steady. The job description was dense with corporate language, but the salary figure at the top made his breath catch. $48,000 a year. Benefits starting after 90 days. Paid time off. Professional development opportunities. It was more than he'd made in his best year ever. It was more than he dared to imagine. "This is incredibly generous," he managed. "But I have to ask, is this a real position or is it being created because Emily feels guilty about what happened?" The question hung in the air for a moment. Jennifer's eyebrows rose and Emily looked briefly startled before a small smile tugged at her lips. "I like him," Emily said to Jennifer. "I can see why." Jennifer turned back to Lucas. "It's a legitimate position, Mr. Hale. We've been trying to fill it for 6 weeks. 3 candidates have made it to final rounds, and none of them were quite right. Emily advocated for giving you a shot, yes, but I make hiring decisions based on merit, not sentiment. I wouldn't offer you this role if I didn't believe you could handle it." "The truth is," Emily said, "I saw something in you that day that I haven't seen in any of our polished, perfectly credentialed candidates. You made a choice that cost you something real, and you made it without hesitation. That kind of character matters in ways that don't always show up on a resume." Lucas looked down at the job description, the words blurring slightly as his mind raced through implications and possibilities. This could change everything. This could mean stability for Maya, could mean health insurance and dental care, and an apartment in a neighborhood where she could play outside safely. This could mean a future that looked like something other than perpetual struggle, but it also felt too easy, too convenient, too much like charity dressed up as opportunity. "Can I be honest with you both?" Lucas asked. "Please," Jennifer said. "I'm not used to things working out. I'm not used to people going out of their way to help me, especially people with the kind of power and resources you have." He met Emily's eyes. "And I'm worried that if I take this position, I'll always wonder if I earned it or if I'm here because of a chance encounter at a crosswalk." Emily was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was soft. "I understand that concern. I've spent my entire career trying to prove I'm not just here because of my last name. So let me ask you something. If we'd never met, if you'd made that interview on Friday and interviewed with the hiring manager for the administrative position, do you think you would have gotten the job?" Lucas considered the question honestly. "I don't know, maybe. I'm a hard worker, and I'm good at what I do. But there were probably other candidates with more relevant experience, better education, stronger networks." "Exactly," Emily said. "The traditional hiring process favors people who already have advantages. Credentials, connections, the luxury of time to build the perfect resume. You're right that you might not have gotten that job through conventional means. But does that mean you don't deserve a job? Or does it mean the conventional system is flawed?" "I think," Jennifer interjected, "what Emily's trying to say is that every hire requires someone to take a chance on someone else. Usually that chance goes to people who fit a certain profile. We're choosing to take a chance on you based on different criteria. That doesn't make it charity. It makes it a different kind of bet." Lucas absorbed this, turning it over in his mind. There was logic to it, even if it still felt uncomfortably close to special treatment. "What if I'm not good at the job?" he asked. "What if I can't handle the workload or the responsibilities?" "Then we'll address it, same as we would with any employee." Jennifer's tone was brisk, businesslike. "You'll have a 90-day probationary period. During that time, you'll receive training, mentorship, and regular feedback. If at the end of 90 days it's clear that the role isn't a good fit, we'll have a conversation about it. But Mr. Hale, I've been in this business for 23 years. I'm very good at reading people. And I don't think you're going to fail." "You stopped everything to help someone you didn't know," Emily added. "You sacrificed something you desperately needed because it was the right thing to do. That tells me you have integrity, and integrity can't be taught. Everything else, the technical skills, the corporate protocols, the industry knowledge, that's all learnable." Lucas looked between these two accomplished, powerful women who were offering him something he'd thought was permanently out of reach. He thought about Maya, about the promises he'd made to her and to himself about building a better life. He thought about the endless cycle of temp work and financial anxiety that had defined the past 3 years. He thought about the moment at the crosswalk when he'd chosen compassion over opportunity, never imagining it might lead here. "If I take this position," he said slowly, "I need you both to understand that I'm going to work harder than anyone else in that department. I'm going to prove that this wasn't a mistake, not because I doubt your judgment, but because I need to know, for myself, that I earned my place here." Jennifer extended her hand across the table. "Mr. Hale, I wouldn't expect anything less. Do we have a deal?" Lucas shook her hand, then Emily's, feeling like he was stepping off a cliff into something vast and unknown. "Yes, we have a deal." The next hour passed in a blur of paperwork, HR procedures, and orientation scheduling. Lucas would start the following Monday, which gave him time to finish out the data entry temp assignment and arrange longer-term childcare for Maya. The benefits package was even better than he'd initially understood. Full health coverage, dental, vision, retirement matching, tuition reimbursement if he wanted to finish his bachelor's degree. When Jennifer finally excused herself to another meeting, Lucas found himself alone with Emily in the conference room. "Thank you," he said. "I know Jennifer made the final decision, but this wouldn't have happened without you. So thank you." Emily smiled, but there was something melancholy in it. "You might end up cursing me once you see how demanding this place can be. We have high standards and higher expectations." "I can handle demanding I understand." Lucas hesitated, then decided to risk honesty. "What I don't understand is why you really did this. And please don't tell me it's just because I helped you. There's something else." Emily was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the polished table. "You reminded me of something I'd forgotten," she said finally. "That day, when you stopped, you saw a person in crisis and you responded like a human being instead of a professional calculating costs and benefits. You didn't help me because it might advance your career or because you thought I could be useful. You helped because it was right." "That's not exactly rare," Lucas said. "It's rarer than you think, especially in environments like this." Emily gestured to the building around them. "I've been drowning for months in a culture that values productivity over humanity, that measures worth in billable hours and profit margins. And then there you were, this stranger who sacrificed something precious to make sure I was okay. It mattered, Lucas. It mattered more than you know." "Are you doing better?" Lucas asked. "Since that day, I mean. Are you taking care of yourself?" The question seemed to catch Emily off guard. She blinked, and for a moment Lucas saw past the professional polish to the exhausted, overwhelmed woman from the crosswalk. "I'm trying," she said quietly. "I had a long conversation with my father, set some boundaries, started seeing a therapist. It's a work in progress." "That's good. I'm glad." They stood there in the conference room, two people whose lives had intersected by chance and been altered in ways neither had predicted. Outside the windows, the city sprawled in all directions, millions of individual stories playing out in parallel, occasionally colliding in moments of unexpected grace. "I should let you go," Emily said. "I'm sure you have things to arrange before Monday." "Yeah, childcare logistics are going to be interesting." Lucas picked up his folder of now unnecessary resume copies. "Emily, for what it's worth, I think you're going to be okay. People who recognize when they need to change, who actually do the hard work of changing, those are the people who make it through." "Right back at you," Emily said, echoing her words from the crosswalk. Lucas left the building and stepped out into the July heat, feeling like he'd crossed some invisible threshold. The future he'd been clawing toward had suddenly materialized, handed to him by someone he'd helped without expectation of reward. It should have felt like victory. And it did, mostly. But underneath the relief and excitement ran a thread of something else. The weight of responsibility. The awareness that he now had something to lose again. He called Mrs. Chen first, asking if she'd be able to provide full-time care for Maya starting next week. Then he called the temp agency to let them know he wouldn't be available after Friday. Then he called Maya's school to update his employment information for their records. With each call, the reality of the situation became more concrete. This was happening. This was real. Lucas picked Maya up from camp that afternoon with a box of the good ice cream bars, the ones he usually couldn't justify buying. "What's the occasion?" she asked, her eyes lighting up. "How do you feel about your dad starting a new job on Monday? A real job with benefits and everything." Maya squealed and threw her arms around his waist. "The interview worked? They gave you the job?" "Something like that." Lucas hugged her back, breathing in the scent of summer camp, sunscreen and playground dust and uncomplicated joy. "Things are going to get better, sweetheart. I promise." "You always keep your promises," Maya said with absolute certainty. Lucas hoped she was right. He'd made a lot of promises over the years, to her and to himself. Promises about showing up, about providing, about building a life that felt like more than just survival. Maybe, finally, he'd be able to keep them all. They spent the evening celebrating in their small apartment, Maya chattering excitedly about all the things they'd be able to do now that Daddy had a real job. Better school supplies. Maybe a new backpack for second grade. A bed that didn't squeak. Lucas listened and made notes and tried not to think too hard about how quickly circumstances could change, how fragile this newfound stability might be. That night, after Maya was asleep, he sat at the kitchen table and wrote out a budget based on his new salary. Even after being conservative with the estimates, there was money left over. Actual surplus for the first time in 3 years. He could save for emergencies, could build a small cushion against disaster, could breathe without constantly calculating how many days until the next paycheck. The relief was so profound, it was almost frightening. Lucas's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When he opened it, he found a message from Emily. "Wanted to make sure you made it home okay. Also wanted to say, I'm glad you stopped that day. Not just because of what it led to for you, but because it reminded me that there are still good people in the world." See you Monday. E. Lucas stared at the message for a long time before typing a response. Glad I stopped too. Take care of yourself. See you Monday. He set the phone down and looked around their small apartment. The peeling linoleum, the secondhand furniture, the toy box overflowing with Maya's treasures. In a few months, they'd be able to move somewhere better. But for tonight, this space felt almost holy, a launching pad for the future they were about to build. Lucas thought about the crosswalk, about the choice that had cost him an interview and somehow, impossibly, led him here. He thought about the strange mathematics of grace, the way sometimes losing everything was the only way to gain what you really needed. He didn't believe in fate or cosmic justice or divine intervention, but he believed in the accumulation of small choices, in the way character revealed itself in moments of crisis, in the possibility that doing the right thing might occasionally, unexpectedly, lead to something good. Friday passed in a haze of final temp work tasks and mental preparation. Lucas trained his replacement on the data entry system, cleaned out his temporary desk space, and said polite goodbyes to people he'd barely gotten to know. The position had been exactly as advertised, boring, isolating, and barely sustainable. He felt no nostalgia about leaving it behind. Saturday, he took Maya shopping for new school supplies, letting her pick out the folders and notebooks she wanted instead of directing her toward the cheapest options. The joy on her face was worth every penny. Sunday, he laid out his clothes for Monday and went over the new employee orientation packet Jennifer had sent him. The Sterling and Associates Employee Handbook was 300 pages of policies and procedures, organizational charts, and mission statements. Lucas read every word, determined to show up prepared. He barely slept Sunday night, his mind churning through scenarios and anxieties. What if he couldn't handle the workload? What if the other employees resented his unconventional hiring? What if he made some catastrophic mistake in the first week and proved everyone right who'd ever doubted him? But when Monday morning arrived and Lucas dressed in his suit and dropped Maya off at Mrs. Chen's house, he felt something shift. The anxiety was still there, thrumming under his skin, but underneath it ran a deeper current of determination. He'd been given a second chance, an opportunity most people in his position never got. He wasn't going to waste it. The Sterling and Associates lobby felt different now that Lucas was walking in as an employee rather than a desperate job candidate. He checked in at reception, received a temporary badge, and was directed to the 7th floor where Jennifer's assistant was waiting to begin orientation. The morning passed in a whirlwind of introductions, system logins, and information overload. Lucas met his direct supervisor, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia, who made it clear she had high standards and limited patience for excuses. He met his team members, a mix of experienced coordinators and newer hires who ranged from welcoming to warily neutral. He received his laptop, his phone, his access cards, and enough passwords to make his head spin. Through it all, he kept his expression professional and his attention focused, taking notes and asking questions and trying to absorb everything fast enough to be useful. He saw Emily twice, once in the hallway, where they exchanged polite nods, and once in a meeting where she was presenting quarterly metrics to the operations team. In professional mode, she was formidable, commanding the room with confidence and precision. Lucas watched her and thought about the woman who'd collapsed on a crosswalk, exhausted and overwhelmed, and marveled at the distance between those two versions of the same person. By the time Monday ended, Lucas's brain felt stuffed full of information he only half understood. But he'd made it through. Day 1, survived. The week continued in much the same pattern, overwhelming amounts of new information, tasks that required skills he was still developing, moments of panic when he thought he'd made a terrible mistake, but also moments of competence, of successfully navigating a challenge, of earning a nod of approval from Patricia or a friendly smile from a teammate. Lucas worked harder than he'd ever worked in his life, arriving early and staying late, taking work home to study after Maya was asleep. He was determined to prove he belonged here, to justify the faith that had been placed in him. Friday afternoon, Jennifer stopped by his desk. "Surviving your first week?" she asked. "Barely," Lucas admitted, "but yes." "Patricia tells me you're doing well, says you ask good questions and follow through on tasks." Jennifer's expression was approving. "Keep it up, Mr. Hale. You're exactly where you're supposed to be." As she walked away, Lucas felt something unclench in his chest. He wasn't failing. He was doing okay. Maybe even more than okay. That night, he picked Maya up from Mrs. Chen's and took her out for pizza. Not the cheap frozen kind they usually ate at home, but real restaurant pizza with unlimited soda refills. Maya talked non-stop about her week at camp, and Lucas listened with the kind of present attention he hadn't been able to afford when he was constantly stressed about money. This was what stability felt like, he realized. Not the absence of challenges, but the presence of resources to meet them. Not certainty about the future, but confidence that he could handle whatever came. It was a gift he'd never take for granted, because he remembered, with crystalline clarity, the moment that had made all of this possible. A woman collapsing on a crosswalk. A choice made without calculation. A sacrifice that had somehow, impossibly, become the thing that saved him. Lucas didn't believe in fairy tales, but he was starting to believe in second chances, and he was determined to make this one count. The transition from survival mode to something resembling stability happened so gradually that Lucas almost didn't notice it at first. 6 weeks into his position at Sterling & Associates, he woke up one Saturday morning and realized he hadn't checked his bank balance in 3 days. For someone who'd spent 3 years monitoring every dollar with obsessive precision, the shift felt almost disorienting. Maya was still asleep, her rabbit tucked under her chin, her face peaceful in the morning light filtering through their apartment window. Lucas lay there watching her breathe and felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not quite contentment, but close. The absence of constant dread, maybe. The knowledge that today's problems wouldn't automatically become tomorrow's catastrophes. They'd been able to afford Maya's dental work. The cavities were filled, the cleaning done, and Lucas had paid the bill without having to choose between that and groceries. Small victory, maybe, but it felt monumental. His phone buzzed with a message from Patricia. Even on weekends, his supervisor maintained her reputation for relentless efficiency. "Need you to review the Hartman project files before Monday's presentation. Emily will be in the meeting and she'll have questions. Be prepared." Lucas had learned quickly that Patricia's management style was built on high expectations and minimal hand-holding. She gave him assignments that stretched his capabilities, then expected him to figure out how to deliver. It was exhausting and occasionally terrifying, but he was learning faster than he'd thought possible. The Hartman project was a major consulting contract for a tech company looking to restructure their operations. Lucas's role was coordinating between the various teams working on different aspects of the proposal, ensuring everyone had the information they needed and deadlines were met. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was essential, and Patricia had made it clear that his performance on this project would factor heavily into his 90-day review, which was coming up in 3 weeks. Lucas pushed the thought away and got out of bed. Weekends were precious, 48 hours when he could focus entirely on Maya, when work emails could wait a few hours, when they could pretend to be a normal family doing normal things. He wasn't going to waste this morning anxieving about performance reviews. "Daddy?" Maya's sleepy voice drifted from her bed. "Is it pancake day?" Lucas smiled. They'd fallen into a Saturday morning routine. Pancakes with chocolate chips, the expensive kind he'd always avoided before. "It's pancake day." "With the real syrup?" "With the real syrup." Maya bounded out of bed with the energy unique to 7-year-olds, and they headed to the kitchen together. While Lucas mixed batter, Maya set the table, chattering about her friend Sophie's upcoming birthday party and whether she could get a present that wasn't from the dollar store this time. "Sophie's mom invited you too," Maya said, carefully arranging forks and napkins. "She said all the parents are coming. There's going to be pizza and games and everything." Lucas had met Sophie's mother exactly once, during drop-off at camp. She'd seemed nice enough, friendly, in that effortless way people had when they weren't constantly calculating the cost of every interaction. The idea of socializing with other parents, actual socializing, not just the harried exchanges in parking lots and doorways, felt strange and vaguely anxiety-inducing. "When is it?" 2 weeks from Saturday. Can we go? Please?" The old Lucas would have immediately started calculating whether he could afford both the present and the 2 hours away from side work or job hunting. The new Lucas, still adjusting to having actual disposable income, just nodded. "We can go. And yes, we'll get Sophie a real present." Maya threw her arms around his waist. "You're the best daddy ever." The declaration was so earnest, so uncomplicated by the realities Lucas wrestled with daily, that it made his throat tight. "I love you too, sweetheart." They spent the morning eating pancakes and watching cartoons, and Lucas tried to be present instead of mentally reviewing project files. But by afternoon, with Maya absorbed in coloring at the kitchen table, he found himself pulling out his laptop and diving into the Hartman materials. The scope of the project was larger than anything he'd handled before. Multiple departments, complex timelines, stakeholders with competing priorities. Lucas had spent the past 2 weeks building spreadsheets and communication protocols, trying to create systems that would keep everyone aligned. But looking at the presentation draft Patricia had sent him, he could see gaps in the logic, places where the proposal didn't quite hang together. Emily would definitely have questions. She had questions about everything, a sharp analytical mind that caught inconsistencies others missed. Lucas had watched her in meetings, the way she could dismantle an argument with a few precisely placed queries. It was impressive and slightly terrifying. He spent the next 3 hours revising the presentation, strengthening weak points and adding supporting data. Maya moved from coloring to playing with her toys to requesting a snack, and Lucas handled it all on autopilot, his mind absorbed in project details. "Daddy, you're working again." Maya stood beside his chair, her expression somewhere between resigned and reproachful. Lucas closed the laptop with a guilty start. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, you're right. No more work today." "You said weekends were for us." "I did say that." He pulled her onto his lap. "And I meant it. I'm done now, I promise." But the truth was he was having trouble finding the boundary between dedication and obsession. The job he'd been given felt both like an opportunity and a test, and he was terrified of failing it. Every project, every task, every interaction carried the weight of proving he belonged here. Patricia had noticed. 2 weeks ago, she'd cornered him after a late evening email exchange. "Hale, you're going to burn yourself out before your probation period ends if you keep this pace." "I'm fine," Lucas had insisted. "Just want to make sure everything's done right." There's a difference between thoroughness and anxiety. Patricia's expression had been uncharacteristically gentle. "You were hired because we believe you can do this job. Start believing it too." Easy advice to give, harder to internalize when you'd spent years on the edge of financial disaster. Sunday passed in a similar pattern. Quality time with Maya punctuated by work thoughts Lucas couldn't quite silence. They went to the park, where Maya played on the swings while Lucas pushed her and tried not to think about Monday's presentation. They made spaghetti for dinner, Maya's favorite, and Lucas let her pick the movie for their evening routine. But after she was asleep, he was back at his laptop, refining slides and rehearsing talking points. Monday morning arrived gray and humid, the kind of weather that made Lucas's cheap suit stick to his skin during the bus commute. He arrived at the office 40 minutes early, as had become his habit, and used the quiet time to review materials one final time. The conference room for the Hartman presentation was the same one where he'd met with Jennifer and Emily 2 months ago. Lucas set up his laptop, tested the projector connection, and arranged hard copies of the proposal around the table. Patricia arrived 15 minutes before the meeting, gave everything a critical once-over, and nodded approval. "Good preparation. Remember, if Emily asks something you don't know, don't try to bluff. Tell her you'll follow up with the specifics." "Got it." "And Hale, breathe. You know this material." The team filtered in over the next 10 minutes. Representatives from consulting, operations, finance, and strategic planning. Emily arrived exactly on time, carrying a tablet and wearing an expression of professional neutrality that gave nothing away. She'd been cordial but distant over the past 6 weeks, their interactions limited to work contexts. Lucas appreciated the boundary, even as he sometimes wondered what she was thinking, whether she was satisfied with the hiring decision or having second thoughts about advocating for him. Patricia called the meeting to order, and Lucas launched into the presentation. He'd practiced the delivery enough times that it flowed smoothly, hitting the key points about project scope, resource allocation, timeline management, and expected outcomes. The team asked clarifying questions as he went, and Lucas answered them with growing confidence. Then Emily spoke up. "Lucas walked me through the risk mitigation strategy on page 12. Specifically, how you're planning to handle potential delays from the client's internal approval processes. Lucas pulled up the relevant slide, but even as he started explaining, he could see the gap in their planning. They'd identified the risk, but hadn't really developed a robust contingency plan. "We've built buffer time into the schedule," he said, then stopped himself. Patricia's advice echoed in his head. "Don't bluff." Actually, that's not sufficient. Looking at this now, we need a more structured approach to managing client-side bottlenecks. I can work with the consulting team to develop specific escalation protocols and alternative approval pathways. Emily's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "How quickly can you have that ready?" "End of day tomorrow." "Make it happen." She made a note on her tablet. "What else are we missing?" The question shifted the dynamic from presentation to working session. For the next hour, the team dissected the proposal, identifying weaknesses and brainstorming solutions. Lucas took notes frantically, his initial presentation completely abandoned in favor of collaborative problem-solving. By the time the meeting ended, they had a substantially stronger proposal, and Lucas had a list of action items that would keep him busy for the next week. He felt simultaneously energized and overwhelmed. As people filed out, Emily lingered behind. "That was good work," she said quietly, "especially the part where you acknowledged the gap instead of trying to cover it. But Patricia told me not to bluff with you." Emily smiled. "Patricia's smart, but that wasn't just following advice. That was integrity. Same thing I saw at the crosswalk." The reference caught Lucas off guard. They'd maintained such careful professional distance that he'd almost forgotten the personal history between them. "How are you doing?" he asked. "Really doing?" Emily glanced toward the door, making sure they were alone. "Better? Some days are harder than others, but I'm managing. Therapy helps. Setting boundaries helps." She paused. "Having one person in this building who sees me as a human being instead of just the CEO's daughter helps too." "You've got more than one person like that," Lucas said. "But I'm glad I can be on that list." "How about you? How's the adjustment been? Patricia says you're exceeding expectations, but you also look exhausted every time I see you." Lucas hesitated, then decided on honesty. "It's hard not to feel like I'm constantly trying to prove I deserve to be here. Like one mistake will confirm everyone's suspicion that I was a charity case." "Lucas, nobody thinks that. And even if they did, who cares? You're doing the work. You're delivering results. That's all that matters." Easy to say when you've never had to doubt your place. The words came out sharper than Lucas intended, and Emily's expression shifted. Not anger, but something more complicated. "You think I've never doubted my place?" Her voice was soft but carried an edge. "I've spent my entire career wondering if every opportunity, every promotion, every bit of recognition was earned or just handed to me because of my name. Trust me, imposter syndrome isn't exclusive to people who started with nothing." Lucas felt immediately ashamed. "I'm sorry. That was out of line." "No, it wasn't. It was honest." Emily moved to the window, looking out over the city. "We both struggle with versions of the same thing, wondering if we're really good enough or if we're just benefiting from circumstances beyond our control. The difference is, I had a safety net if I fell. You didn't. So yeah, the stakes feel different for you, but the doubt? That's universal." They stood in silence for a moment, two people navigating different versions of the same insecurity in a building full of people who seemed supremely confident in their own competence. "For what it's worth," Emily said finally, "I don't regret pushing for your hiring, not for a second. You've earned your place here, Lucas. Start letting yourself believe it." She left before he could respond, and Lucas stood alone in the conference room, her words echoing in his head. The rest of the week was a blur of work on the Hartman proposal and his regular coordination responsibilities. Lucas stayed late 3 nights in a row, building out the risk mitigation protocols Emily had requested, and ensuring every detail was airtight. Patricia reviewed his work with her usual critical eye and pronounced it acceptable, which Lucas had learned was her version of high praise. Maya noticed his increased hours despite his best efforts to hide them. "You're tired all the time now," she said Thursday night while he helped her with homework. "Like you were before the new job." The observation stung because it was accurate. Lucas had promised himself he wouldn't fall back into the pattern of overwork that had characterized his temp job years, but here he was, sacrificing sleep and presence for the sake of proving himself. "You're right," he admitted. "I've been working too much. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Is it because you're scared they'll fire you? The perceptiveness of children was sometimes devastating. A little bit, yeah. But you're really good at your job. Mrs. Chen says so. Mrs. Chen doesn't work with me. No. But she says you must be good because we have the fancy ice cream now and you smile more. Maya looked up from her math worksheet. You do smile more, Daddy, even when you're tired. Lucas pulled her into a hug, overwhelmed by her simple wisdom. She was right. Despite the exhaustion, despite the anxiety about his probation period, he was fundamentally happier than he'd been in years. The constant dread that had shadowed every moment for so long had lifted, replaced by normal work stress and manageable challenges. I'm going to do better, he promised. No more late nights this week. We'll have our weekend time, just like we're supposed to. Can we go to the library? I want to get new books. Absolutely. Saturday morning, library trip. It's a date. Friday afternoon, Lucas submitted the final Hartman proposal materials to Patricia. She reviewed them during their weekly check-in meeting, her expression giving away nothing as she scrolled through page after page. This is comprehensive, she said finally. Thorough risk analysis, realistic timelines, clear accountability structures. Well done, Hale. The praise felt disproportionately meaningful. Lucas had to resist the urge to ask if she really meant it, if she thought it was good enough, if there was anything else he should fix. Thank you. The team contributed a lot of good ideas. They did, but you coordinated it all and made sure nothing fell through the cracks. That's your job, and you did it well. Patricia closed her laptop. Emily was impressed with how you handled the meeting Monday. Said you showed real integrity, acknowledging the gaps in our initial plan. Just seemed like the right thing to do. It was. It's also rare. A lot of people in your position would have tried to defend the work as is, especially given that you're still in your probation period. Patricia studied him with those sharp eyes that seemed to see more than Lucas was comfortable with. Speaking of which, your 90-day review is scheduled for next Friday, 2 o'clock. Lucas's stomach dropped. He'd known it was coming, had been mentally preparing, but having the actual date made it suddenly terrifyingly real. Anything I should know going into it? Just be ready to talk about your experience so far, challenges you've faced, goals for your continued development. Patricia's expression softened slightly. And Hale? Stop looking so terrified. This isn't an execution. It's a conversation. Right, a conversation that determines whether I keep my job. A conversation that confirms what I already know, that you're exactly where you should be. She stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Go home, Hale. It's Friday afternoon. Spend time with your daughter. The work will still be here Monday. Lucas took the advice, leaving the office at a reasonable hour for the first time all week. He picked Maya up from Mrs. Chen's and took her to the park, where they fed ducks stale bread and talked about her upcoming second-grade year and whether she might want to try soccer or dance classes now that they could afford extracurriculars. Really? I can pick? Maya's eyes were wide with disbelief. Really? What sounds fun to you? Dance. Sophie does dance, and she says it's so fun, and they get to wear sparkly costumes for the recital. The sparkly costumes probably cost a fortune, but Lucas found himself not caring. Maya had spent too much of her young life hearing, "We can't afford that," in response to perfectly reasonable requests. If she wanted to wear a sparkly costume and learn to dance, then she would dance. Then we'll look into dance classes. We can visit some studios, see which one you like best. Maya threw her arms around him with such force that they both nearly toppled over. Thank you, Daddy. This is the best day ever. Lucas held her and watched the ducks paddle across the pond and tried to hold on to this feeling. The simple joy of being able to give his daughter something she wanted, the absence of crushing anxiety about money, the sense that maybe, possibly, they were going to be okay. Saturday morning, they made good on the library promise. Lucas let Maya check out 10 books, the maximum allowed, and didn't stress about late fees or damaged covers. They stopped for coffee on the way home. Actual coffee from a cafe, not the instant stuff he made at home. And Maya got hot chocolate with whipped cream. Fancy, she pronounced it, and Lucas couldn't help but laugh. Yeah, kiddo, fancy. They spent the afternoon reading together on the couch, Maya working through an illustrated chapter book, while Lucas finally cracked open a novel he'd been meaning to read for months. No work emails, no project files, just the quiet pleasure of a Saturday afternoon with nowhere to be and nothing urgent demanding his attention. Sunday, they went to Sophie's birthday party. Lucas had bought a gift that was thoughtful without being excessive, an art set with colored pencils and a sketchbook, and watched Maya present it with pride instead of embarrassment. Sophie's mother, Karen, greeted him warmly and introduced him to other parents, and Lucas found himself in actual conversations about schools and neighborhoods and the challenges of raising kids in the city. It felt normal, remarkably, wonderfully normal. "Your first time at one of these?" Karen asked, handing him a beer from the cooler. "That obvious? You've got the look of someone who's still surprised to be here." She smiled kindly. "I remember that feeling. Single parent? Widower, 3 years now. I'm sorry, that must be incredibly hard." "It was. It's getting easier." Lucas watched Maya playing with the other kids, her laughter bright and unrestrained. "I got a new job recently. Better pay, better hours. It's making a real difference." "That's wonderful. What do you do?" "Program coordinator at Sterling and Associates, Operations Department." Karen's eyebrows rose. "Sterling? That's a great company. My husband works there, actually, in the consulting division. Mark Weber. You might have crossed paths." Lucas recognized the name from the Hartman project team. "We've been in meetings together. Small world. Isn't it? You should come to the company family picnic next month. They do it every August, and it's actually pretty fun. Good chance to meet people outside the office context." The idea of attending a corporate family event, of being part of that world, still felt slightly surreal, but Lucas found himself nodding. "We'll be there." The conversation drifted to other topics, and Lucas relaxed into it, discovering that he actually enjoyed talking to other adults about non-work subjects. He'd been so isolated for so long, his entire social world reduced to brief exchanges with neighbors and Maya's teachers. Having real conversations with people who didn't know his whole sad backstory felt liberating. By the time they left, Maya was exhausted and happy, clutching a goodie bag and chattering about how much fun she'd had. Lucas felt the same way, though he couldn't quite articulate why. Something about being included, maybe? About feeling like they belonged to a community instead of just surviving on its margins. Monday morning brought him back to reality with the usual rush of meetings and deadlines. The Hartman proposal was moving forward, which meant coordinating presentations for the client and ensuring all deliverables were on track. Lucas juggled conference calls and email chains and last-minute requests with growing confidence, his systems holding up under pressure. Tuesday afternoon, Emily stopped by his desk. "Got a minute?" "Of course." Lucas saved his work and followed her to one of the small meeting rooms scattered throughout the floor. Emily closed the door and turned to face him, her expression more serious than usual. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it as your colleague, not as the person who helped get you hired." Lucas's stomach tightened. "Okay." "My father is planning to attend your 90-day review on Friday." "What? Why?" "Because I told him about you, about what happened at the crosswalk, about your performance here, about how you're exactly the kind of employee we should be hiring." Emily's voice carried an edge of frustration. "He wants to meet you himself, see if you live up to my description." "That's not, Emily, that's going to make everything so much more complicated." "I know, I tried to talk him out of it, but when he gets an idea in his head..." She trailed off, helplessly. "I'm sorry. I thought you should know ahead of time rather than being ambushed." Lucas sank into a chair, his mind racing. A 90-day review was already high stakes enough without adding the CEO into the mix. Richard Carter was a legend in the consulting world, known for building Sterling and Associates from a small firm into a major player through sheer force of will and strategic brilliance. The idea of being evaluated by him personally was terrifying. What does he want from me? Honestly, I'm not sure. He's been talking a lot lately about values-based hiring, about finding people with character instead of just credentials. I think you represent something to him, some validation of that philosophy. Emily sat down across from Lucas. But it's also possible he wants to verify that I wasn't just being sentimental, that you really are as good as I've said. No pressure then. I know this is unfair. You should be evaluated on your work performance, not on whether you meet my father's expectations for what a values-based hire looks like. Emily's expression was genuinely apologetic. But for what it's worth, Patricia's assessment will carry the most weight. My father trusts her judgment absolutely. And what's Patricia's assessment? You'll have to ask her, but I haven't heard any concerns. Lucas tried to take comfort in that, but his mind was already spiraling through worst-case scenarios. What if he froze up in front of Richard Carter? What if the CEO decided Lucas was proof that Emily's judgment was compromised by emotion? What if this whole thing blew up and cost him the job he'd worked so hard to prove he could handle? Hey, Emily's voice cut through the spiral. Look at me. You've done excellent work here. You've exceeded expectations on every project. You've earned your place. Nothing that happens in that review is going to change those facts. Unless your father decides I'm not what Sterling and Associates needs, then he'd be wrong, and I'd tell him so. The fierce certainty in her voice surprised Lucas. Emily had been professional and encouraging, but this felt like something more, like she was genuinely invested in his success beyond just validating her own hiring recommendation. Why does this matter so much to you? He asked. Emily was quiet for a long moment. Because you reminded me why I wanted to work here in the first place, before the politics and the pressure and the constant need to prove myself. You showed me what it looks like to make decisions based on values instead of calculating advantage. And I need that reminder. This place needs that reminder. She met his eyes. So yes, I'm invested in your success. Not just because it validates my judgment, but because you being here makes this company better. Makes me better. Lucas didn't know what to say to that. The weight of Emily's expectations felt both honoring and terrifying. I'll do my best, he said finally. I know you will. You always do. The rest of the week took on a surreal quality as Lucas prepared for Friday's review while trying to maintain his normal workload. He compiled documentation of his completed projects, prepared talking points about his development goals, and rehearsed answers to potential questions until the words lost all meaning. Thursday night, he barely slept. Maya noticed at breakfast Friday morning. Big day? She asked, offering him half her toast. The biggest. Remember I told you about my 90-day review, the meeting that decides if I get to keep working at the new job? You're going to do great, Daddy. You always do great at important things. Lucas wished he had half her confidence. The morning crawled by in a haze of distraction and mounting anxiety. Lucas accomplished almost nothing productive, his mind too absorbed in running through scenarios. Patricia noticed during their morning check-in but said nothing, just gave him a look that was equal parts sympathy and expectation. At 1:45, Lucas gathered his materials and headed to the conference room. Patricia was already there, reviewing something on her laptop. She looked up when he entered. You look like you're about to face a firing squad. Feels like it. It's not. Sit down, Hale. Let's talk before the others arrive. Lucas sat, gripping his folder of documentation like a lifeline. I've been doing this job for 12 years, Patricia said. I've conducted more 90-day reviews than I can count, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that yours is going to be one of the easiest. Emily said the CEO is coming. He is, and you're going to be fine. Patricia's voice was firm. You've done exceptional work, Lucas. You've tackled every challenge I've thrown at you. You've built strong relationships with your teammates, and you've shown exactly the kind of character and judgment this company values. Richard Carter is going to see that immediately. What if he doesn't? Then I'll make sure he does. That's my job. She softened slightly. Trust yourself, Hale. Trust the work you've done. And remember, you've already survived much harder things than a performance review. The reminder steadied him. Patricia was right. He'd survived his wife's death, survived years of poverty and instability, survived every setback and disappointment that had brought him to this moment. A meeting with the CEO was just another challenge. He could handle it. At 2 o'clock exactly, the door opened. Jennifer Walsh entered first, followed by Emily. And behind them, a man in his early 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Richard Carter extended his hand to Lucas. Mr. Hale, I've been looking forward to meeting you. Lucas stood and shook his hand, trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. Mr. Carter, the feeling is mutual. Please, sit. Richard took the seat at the head of the table, Jennifer and Emily flanking him while Patricia remained at Lucas's side. The positioning felt deliberate, like they were being evaluated as a unit rather than Lucas alone. Richard opened a folder, Lucas's personnel file, he realized with a lurch of anxiety, and spent a moment reviewing it in silence. Then he looked up, his expression unreadable. "Tell me something, Mr. Hale. Why do you think you're here?" The question was so unexpected that Lucas almost laughed. "Because I stopped to help someone who needed it, and it turned out that someone had the power to give me an opportunity I desperately needed." That's the simple version. What's the complicated version? Lucas glanced at Patricia, who gave him the slightest nod of encouragement. The complicated version is that I think your daughter saw something in me that traditional hiring processes might have missed, and you're here to determine whether she was right or whether sentiment clouded her judgment. Richard Carter smiled. "I like directness. Yes, that's exactly why I'm here. So let's find out if she was right." The silence that followed Richard Carter's declaration stretched just long enough to make Lucas's palms sweat. He forced himself to maintain eye contact with the CEO, refusing to look away despite every instinct screaming at him to show deference. Patricia broke the tension by sliding a document across the table. These are Lucas's performance metrics for his first 90 days. Project completion rates, team feedback scores, quality assessments, all significantly above average for someone in his position. Richard picked up the document but didn't look at it. His eyes remained fixed on Lucas. Numbers tell part of the story. I'm more interested in the parts they don't tell. Walk me through the Hartman proposal process. I understand you coordinated that effort. Lucas took a breath and launched into a summary of the project, hitting the key points about timeline management, stakeholder coordination, and risk mitigation. He kept his tone professional and factual, resisting the urge to oversell or embellish. When he reached the part about the Monday meeting with Emily, he didn't shy away from describing how he'd acknowledged the gaps in their initial planning. So you essentially told the team, including my daughter, that your work wasn't good enough. Richard's tone was neutral, giving away nothing. I told them the truth. The risk mitigation section had a significant weakness. Pretending otherwise would have damaged the proposal and wasted everyone's time. Most people in your position, especially during their probation period, would have defended the work and hoped no one noticed the gap. Most people in my position wouldn't have been given this opportunity in the first place, Lucas said. I'm not interested in keeping this job by cutting corners or being dishonest. If that's what's required, then this isn't the right fit anyway. Jennifer's eyebrows rose slightly. Emily looked like she was trying not to smile. Patricia's expression remained carefully neutral, but Lucas thought he detected approval in her eyes. Richard leaned back in his chair, studying Lucas with an intensity that felt like being X-rayed. You have a daughter, correct? 7 years old? The shift in topic caught Lucas off guard. Yes, sir. Maya. Single father, widower. Been raising her alone for 3 years while working a series of temporary positions that barely paid your bills. Richard recited the facts from Lucas's file without looking at it. That's a hell of a burden to carry while trying to build a career. It's not a burden. She's my daughter. Taking care of her is the most important thing I do. Even when it costs you opportunities? Jobs you couldn't take because of the schedule? Positions you couldn't pursue because you needed to be available for school pickups and sick days? Lucas felt the conversation shifting into territory he didn't entirely understand. Yes, even then, a job that requires me to fail as a father isn't worth having. And yet you missed your initial interview here because you stopped to help a stranger, knowing you desperately needed that job, knowing your daughter was depending on you to secure better employment. Richard's voice carried a challenge. How do you reconcile choosing to help Emily with your responsibility to your daughter? The question felt like a trap, but Lucas couldn't identify which answer would spring it. He decided, as he always did, on honesty. I don't think those things are in conflict. Yes, I needed that job. But what kind of example would I be setting for Maya if I taught her that desperation justifies ignoring someone in crisis? That getting ahead matters more than helping people who need it? Lucas shook his head. I want my daughter to grow up knowing that character matters more than convenience. I can't teach her that if I don't live it myself. Even when living it costs you everything? Especially then. The choices that matter most are the ones that cost us something. Richard was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to Patricia. What's your assessment? Can he handle increased responsibility? Lucas's heart stuttered. Increased responsibility? He'd been bracing for evaluation of whether he could keep his current position, not discussion of advancement. Patricia didn't hesitate. Absolutely. Lucas has demonstrated leadership capacity that exceeds his current role. He identifies problems proactively, communicates effectively across departments, and earns trust from colleagues at all levels. With proper mentorship, he could move into senior coordination or even junior management within a year. Emily? Richard looked at his daughter. Your evaluation. Emily met her father's gaze steadily. I stand by everything I said when I recommended hiring Lucas. He brings exactly the kind of integrity and judgment we claim to value, but rarely prioritize in our hiring processes. Beyond that, he's proven to be an exceptional employee who makes everyone around him better. I'd advocate for his advancement without reservation. Jennifer? The COO nodded. I've observed Lucas in several cross-departmental meetings. He has a rare combination of analytical skills and emotional intelligence. He reads people well, anticipates needs, and manages conflict without drama. Those are qualities we can develop in terms of specific expertise, but the foundation is already there. Richard turned back to Lucas. You're hearing 3 senior leaders tell me you're ready for more responsibility. How do you feel about that? Lucas struggled to process what was happening. This review had gone completely off script from what he'd anticipated. Honestly, overwhelmed. I've been so focused on proving I can handle my current job that I haven't thought much beyond that. That's because you've been operating in survival mode for 3 years, Richard said. Patricia tells me you regularly stay late, take work home, and respond to emails at all hours. That you're consistently the first person in the office and often the last to leave. I want to do good work. There's a difference between dedication and desperation, Mr. Hale. The question is whether you can recognize that difference and adjust accordingly. Richard closed the personnel file. Here's what's going to happen. Your probationary period is successfully complete. You're now a permanent employee of Sterling and Associates with all corresponding benefits and protections. Additionally, we're moving you into a senior coordinator position with a salary adjustment to $62,000 annually, effective immediately. Lucas felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. $62,000. That was nearly $30,000 more than he'd made in his best year ever. That was enough to move to a better neighborhood, to afford dance classes and birthday parties and all the normal childhood experiences Maya had been missing. That was life-changing money. I don't know what to say, he managed. Say you'll accept the position, Jennifer said with a slight smile. And say you'll work with Patricia to develop a sustainable work-life balance so you don't burn out before we can benefit from your full potential. I accept, and I will. Thank you, all of you. Lucas looked around the table at these people who'd taken a chance on him, who were now doubling down on that investment. I won't let you down. We know, Patricia said. That's why we're promoting you. Richard stood, and everyone else followed suit. Mr. Hale, I have one more question before we conclude. Why do you think Emily collapsed that day at the crosswalk? The question was so unexpected that Lucas glanced at Emily before answering. She looked just as surprised as he felt. From what she told me, she was working herself into the ground, trying to prove she belonged here, trying to demonstrate she'd earned her position rather than being handed it because of her name. And did you think less of her when you learned who her father was? No. If anything, I respected her more. It's harder to prove yourself when people assume your success is unearned. Richard nodded slowly. My daughter nearly killed herself trying to meet standards I didn't even realize I was imposing. Standards that said credentials and pedigree mattered more than character and judgment, that the right background was more important than the right values. He looked at Emily with an expression that was equal parts love and regret. Watching her collapse, literally and figuratively, made me realize we'd lost our way. That Sterling and Associates had become exactly the kind of place that would walk past someone in crisis, because stopping might be inconvenient. Dad, Emily started, but Richard held up a hand. Let me finish. When Emily told me about you, about what you'd sacrificed to help her, I was skeptical. I thought she was being sentimental, that she'd elevated a simple act of kindness into something more significant than it was. But watching you these past 90 days, seeing the work you've done and the way you've conducted yourself, I realized she was right. Character matters. Integrity matters. And we need to build a company culture that recognizes and rewards those qualities instead of accidentally punishing them. He extended his hand to Lucas again. Thank you, Mr. Hale. Not just for helping my daughter, but for reminding this organization what we're supposed to stand for. Lucas shook his hand, still processing everything that had just happened. Thank you for giving me the chance to prove it. After Richard and Jennifer left, Lucas sank back into his chair, feeling like he'd just survived something intense and transformative. Patricia gathered her materials with brisk efficiency. Congratulations, Hale. You've earned this. She paused at the door. But I meant what I said about work-life balance. I'm going to be monitoring your hours, and if I see you falling back into unsustainable patterns, we're going to have a conversation. Clear? Crystal clear? Good. Now go call your daughter and tell her the good news. I'm sure she's been worried. After Patricia left, Lucas found himself alone with Emily. She was still sitting across from him, an expression on her face he couldn't quite read. That was intense, Lucas said finally. Emily laughed, a slightly shaky sound. That's one word for it. I had no idea my father was planning to turn your review into a referendum on company values. Did you know about the promotion? Not specifically. I knew they were discussing it, but I didn't know he'd decided to announce it today. She leaned forward. Lucas, you deserve this. I know it probably feels overwhelming, but you've genuinely earned it through your work here. This isn't charity or sentiment. Your father said you nearly killed yourself trying to prove you belonged. Is that true? Emily's expression shifted, vulnerability breaking through her professional composure. Yeah, it's true. I was working 16-hour days, 7 days a week, barely sleeping or eating, telling myself that if I just worked hard enough, exceeded every expectation, eventually people would stop seeing me as Richard Carter's daughter and start seeing me as Emily Carter, competent professional. She smiled sadly. And then I collapsed on a crosswalk and realized I was killing myself for the approval of people whose opinions shouldn't matter that much. But you're doing better now? I am. Therapy helps. So does having actual boundaries. And so does having at least one person in this building who sees me as a human being instead of a resume or a last name. She met his eyes. You asked me once why this mattered so much to me, why I was so invested in your success. The truth is, watching you navigate this place with integrity intact reminds me why I wanted to work here. You make me want to be better. Make me believe that maybe we can build something here that's actually worth the sacrifices we make for it. Lucas didn't know what to say to that. The weight of Emily's expectations, her hope that he represented something meaningful, felt both honoring and overwhelming. I'm just trying to do good work and take care of my daughter, he said. I'm not sure I'm equipped to be anyone's inspiration. That's exactly why you are one. Emily stood, smoothing her skirt. Anyway, congratulations on the promotion. You're going to be great in the new role. And Lucas, thank you for everything. She left before he could respond, and Lucas sat alone in the conference room trying to process everything that had just happened. 3 months ago, he'd been a desperate single father barely keeping his head above water, cobbling together temp jobs and rationing good cheese. Now he was a senior coordinator at a respected consulting firm making more money than he'd ever imagined, with a CEO who'd personally endorsed his character and colleagues who believed in his potential. It felt unreal. Like any moment he might wake up and find himself back in that cramped apartment with nothing but rejection emails and mounting bills. His phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Mrs. Chen must have let her use her phone. Did you get to keep your job? Lucas smiled and typed back. I got to keep it. And I got a promotion. We're celebrating tonight. Where do you want to go for dinner? The response was immediate. Anywhere? Anywhere. The fancy place with the breadsticks. Lucas laughed. The fancy place was a mid-range Italian restaurant they'd passed dozens of times but never been able to afford. Maya had been fascinated by the breadsticks in the window display since she was 5. The fancy place it is? I love you, sweetheart. I love you too, Daddy. I knew you would do great. Lucas put his phone away and headed back to his desk, where his computer screen showed 17 new emails. His first instinct was to dive in immediately, to start working through them with the same frantic energy he'd brought to every task for the past 90 days. Instead, he closed his laptop. Patricia's words echoed in his head. There was a difference between dedication and desperation. For 3 months, Lucas had been operating on desperation, terrified that any moment of relaxation might cost him everything. But he'd passed his review. He'd been promoted. The job was secure. Maybe it was time to start believing that. He left the office at 5 o'clock for the first time since starting at Sterling and Associates. The summer evening was still bright and warm, the city alive with people heading home or out to happy hour. Lucas walked to the bus stop with his shoulders relaxed, his mind quiet, and called Maya on the way. "Hey, sweetheart, what do you say we pick you up early from Mrs. Chen's and go get those breadsticks?" The squeal of delight that came through the phone made Lucas smile wider than he had in weeks, maybe years. The Italian restaurant was everything Maya had imagined and more. The breadsticks were warm and garlicky, the pasta was generous, and the waiter brought her a Shirley Temple with extra cherries when Lucas explained they were celebrating. Maya told him about her day at camp in exhaustive detail, and Lucas listened with full attention, not checking his phone even once. "Daddy, are we rich now?" Maya asked around a mouthful of spaghetti. "We're not rich, sweetheart, but we're doing okay, better than okay." "Does this mean I can really take dance classes?" "It means you can take dance classes, and we can move to a better apartment, and I can stop worrying so much about money all the time." Maya considered this seriously. "You worry a lot about money." "I did. I probably won't stop completely, but it's going to be better now." "Good. I don't like it when you're worried. You get all quiet, and your forehead does the wrinkly thing." Lucas laughed and reached across the table to ruffle her hair. "I'll try to keep the wrinkly thing to a minimum." They ordered dessert, tiramisu that Maya pronounced fancy and weird but good, and walked home through the warm evening instead of taking the bus. Their apartment building looked shabbier than usual in the golden light, and Lucas found himself mentally calculating how long before they could afford to move somewhere nicer. Maybe by the end of summer. Definitely before Maya started 2nd grade. That night, after Maya was asleep, Lucas sat at the kitchen table and did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He made a budget that included savings. Real savings, not just whatever few dollars happened to be left at the end of the month. Money set aside for emergencies, for Maya's future, for the unexpected crises that inevitably came. The numbers worked. They actually worked. Even after accounting for a better apartment, dance classes, and building an emergency fund, there was money left over. Not a fortune, but enough to breathe, enough to live instead of just survive. Lucas closed his laptop and sat in the quiet darkness of their apartment, letting the reality settle into his bones. They were going to be okay. After 3 years of struggling and scraping and barely holding on, they were finally, genuinely going to be okay. The weekend passed in a haze of celebration and apartment hunting. Lucas had explained to Maya that they were going to look for a new place to live, and she'd approached the task with 7-year-old seriousness, making a list of requirements that included a pink room, a park nearby, and space for dance practice. They visited 6 apartments on Saturday, ranging from barely better than their current place to significantly out of Lucas's budget. But the 4th one, a 2-bedroom in a safe neighborhood with a small park 2 blocks away and a community center that offered dance classes, felt right the moment they walked in. "This is it," Maya announced, spinning in the empty living room. "This is our new home." "We haven't even seen the bedrooms yet, sweetheart." "Don't need to. I can feel it. This is the one." The landlord, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes, smiled at Maya's certainty. "She's got good instincts. This is a solid building, quiet neighbors, good schools nearby. When would you be looking to move in?" Lucas did rapid mental math. First month, last month, security deposit. Even with his raise, it would take most of his savings. But they could do it. They could actually do this. End of August? That would give me time to save up for the move and get my daughter settled before school starts. End of August works. Let me get you an application. They filled out the paperwork at a coffee shop, Maya drinking hot chocolate while Lucas provided references and employment information. Writing Senior Coordinator, Sterling and Associates in the employment section felt surreal. 3 months ago, he would have had to list a temp agency and hope they didn't check too carefully. The approval came Monday afternoon. Lucas was in a meeting when his phone buzzed with the email, and he had to excuse himself to read it twice and make sure he wasn't hallucinating. Application approved. Lease ready for signature. Congratulations on your new home. He forwarded it to Mrs. Chen with a brief explanation, and she responded immediately with a string of celebration emojis and an offer to help with the move. The news seemed to unlock something in Lucas's chest that had been tight for years. They had a home. A real home in a safe neighborhood where Maya could play outside and attend a good school and take dance classes at the community center down the street. It was everything he'd been working toward, everything he'd sacrificed for, manifesting in a simple email confirmation. That evening, he told Maya over dinner, actual cooked dinner, not cereal or instant noodles. "We got the apartment, the one you liked. We're going to move in at the end of August." Maya's fork clattered to her plate. "Really? The one with the park?" "The one with the park. And the community center 2 blocks away offers dance classes starting in September. I already called and got you enrolled." Maya launched herself out of her chair and into his arms with enough force to nearly knock him over. "Thank you, Daddy. Thank you, thank you, thank you." Lucas held her tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and feeling the weight of 3 years of struggle finally lift from his shoulders. "You're welcome, sweetheart. You deserve this. We both do." The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and preparation. Lucas's new role as senior coordinator came with expanded responsibilities, managing larger projects, mentoring junior coordinators, serving on cross-departmental teams. The learning curve was steep, but Patricia's prediction proved accurate. Lucas adapted quickly, his natural organizational skills and emotional intelligence translating well to the increased demands. He also, with Patricia's pointed reminders, started maintaining better work-life balance. He left the office by 6 most days, stopped checking emails after 8 p.m., and took his full lunch breaks instead of eating at his desk. The world didn't end. Projects still got completed. And Lucas discovered he actually worked better when he wasn't constantly exhausted. Emily checked in periodically, their conversations gradually shifting from formal professional exchanges to something approaching actual friendship. She'd taken her own advice about boundaries seriously, Lucas noticed. She still worked hard, but the desperate edge was gone. She smiled more, looked healthier. "How's the apartment hunt going?" she asked one afternoon when they ended up in the break room at the same time. "Done, actually. We move in 3 weeks. Maya's already planning where everything is going to go." "That's wonderful. New neighborhood?" Better schools, safer streets, actual park within walking distance." Lucas poured coffee, still getting used to the luxury of the good stuff the office provided. "Still feels a bit surreal." "You've earned it, Lucas. Stop waiting for it to be taken away." "Easier said than done when you've spent years having things taken away." Emily was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was soft. "My father told me something after your review. He said watching you made him realize that sometimes the people who've had to fight hardest for everything are the ones who appreciate it most, who don't take it for granted." She met his eyes. "You're going to be one of the good ones, Lucas, the kind of leader people want to work for because you remember what it's like to struggle." "I'm not sure I'm leadership material." "Patricia thinks you are. So does Jennifer. So do I." Emily smiled. "And eventually, you're going to start believing it too." The moving day arrived hot and humid, the kind of August weather that made every physical task feel like running through water. Mrs. Chen had recruited her son and his friends to help, and between them and some neighbors from the old building, they managed to transfer Lucas's modest collection of furniture and boxes to the new apartment in a single afternoon. Maya supervised the process with 7-year-old authority, directing where boxes should go and insisting her new room be set up first. By evening, they were surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, but sleeping in beds in their new home. Lucas stood in the living room after Maya was asleep, looking around at the space that was now theirs. Decent-sized rooms, windows that let in actual light, floors that didn't creak ominously, a kitchen with appliances that all worked, a bathroom with water pressure that didn't fluctuate wildly. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't the kind of place his colleagues at Sterling and Associates probably lived in, but it was safe and clean and theirs, and that was everything. His phone rang with a call from an unknown number. Lucas almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Hale? This is Richard Carter. I hope I'm not calling too late." Lucas straightened unconsciously, despite being alone in his apartment. "Mr. Carter, no, not too late, too. Is everything okay?" Everything's fine. I wanted to reach out personally to let you know about an opportunity we're considering for next year. We're planning to launch a new initiative around values-based leadership development, identifying high-potential employees and providing intensive mentorship and training. Your name came up in the preliminary discussions. Lucas leaned against the wall, processing this. That's unexpected. I've only been here 4 months, which is exactly why you're interesting to us. You haven't had time to absorb all the corporate conditioning that makes people forget why they got into this work in the first place. You still remember what matters. Richard paused. I'm not offering you anything concrete yet. The program is still in development, but I wanted you to know you're on our radar for opportunities beyond your current position. Keep doing what you're doing, keep growing, and we'll see where it leads. Thank you, sir. I appreciate the confidence. Thank my daughter. She's been advocating for this kind of program for months. You just gave her the proof of concept she needed to convince me it was worth pursuing. There was warmth in Richard's voice. Have a good evening, Mr. Hale. Enjoy your new home. After he hung up, Lucas stood in the quiet of his new apartment, trying to absorb what had just happened. 4 months ago, he'd been a temp worker with no prospects and no hope of anything better. Now he was being considered for leadership development by one of the most respected consulting firms in the city. The trajectory was dizzying, impossible, and yet undeniably real. Lucas walked to Maya's new room and stood in the doorway, watching her sleep. She looked peaceful, safe, her rabbit tucked under her chin and her face relaxed in a way it hadn't been in their old apartment. This was what he'd been fighting for all along. Not corporate advancement or impressive titles, but this, the simple security of a child sleeping safely in a home that wasn't going to disappear out from under them. Everything else was bonus. Unexpected grace built on a foundation of one choice made at a crosswalk on a brutally hot afternoon. Lucas had stopped to help someone in crisis, sacrificing what he thought was his only chance at a better future. And somehow, impossibly, that sacrifice had become the thing that opened every door he'd been desperately trying to force open through sheer effort. He didn't believe in fate, didn't believe in cosmic reward systems or karma, but he believed in character, believed in integrity, believed that sometimes, just sometimes, doing the right thing led to something good. And standing in his new apartment, watching his daughter sleep safely, Lucas allowed himself to believe that maybe, finally, they were exactly where they were supposed to be. The universe didn't owe him anything, but it had given him this chance, this opportunity, this moment of peace after years of struggle. And he was going to make it count, for Maya, for himself, and for everyone else who'd taken a chance on the man who stopped at a crosswalk when everyone else just walked on by. September arrived with cooler temperatures and the particular energy that came with new beginnings. Maya started second grade at her new school, a clean building with adequate funding and teachers who seemed genuinely invested in their students. Lucas walked her to the bus stop that first morning, watching her climb aboard with her new backpack and the confidence of a child who finally felt secure in her world. "Love you, Daddy," she called from the steps. "Love you too, sweetheart. Have an amazing day." The bus pulled away, and Lucas stood on the corner of their new neighborhood, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, contentment mixed with cautious optimism. Maya was thriving. The new apartment had transformed from a collection of boxes into an actual home. His work at Sterling and Associates continued to challenge and fulfill him in ways his previous jobs never had. Life, improbably, was good. That didn't stop the anxiety from creeping in at unexpected moments. Old survival instincts didn't disappear just because circumstances improved. Lucas still caught himself calculating costs obsessively, still felt a jolt of panic when unexpected expenses arose, still woke up some nights convinced this was all temporary and would inevitably collapse. Patricia had noticed during their weekly check-ins. She'd started incorporating conversations about sustainable success into their meetings, pointing out when Lucas was reverting to desperate patterns versus operating from a place of confidence. "You're still acting like someone who might lose everything tomorrow," she'd said last week, "and I understand why. But that mindset will sabotage your growth if you don't address it." Lucas had taken the feedback seriously, even started seeing a therapist that his new insurance covered. The sessions were helping, slowly rewiring thought patterns that had been carved deep by years of instability. But change took time, and old fears had deep roots. Work itself provided a welcome distraction from overthinking. The leadership development program Richard Carter had mentioned was taking shape, and Lucas found himself pulled into planning meetings alongside Emily and several other senior leaders. The goal was to identify employees with potential and provide them with mentorship, training, and exposure to different aspects of the business. We want people who demonstrate our values, not just people who look good on paper, Emily explained during one planning session. People like you, Lucas. People who make decisions based on character rather than just calculating advantage. I'm still not convinced I'm the right model for this, Lucas said. I got here through unusual circumstances. That's not exactly replicable. The circumstances were unusual, Jennifer agreed. She'd been instrumental in designing the program structure. But what you've done since arriving is entirely replicable. You've worked hard, asked good questions, built strong relationships, and delivered consistent results. That's what we want to teach others to do. The program was set to launch in January, and Lucas had been asked to serve as a mentor for one of the participants. The responsibility felt both honoring and terrifying. Who was he to mentor anyone when he was still figuring things out himself? But Emily had pulled him aside after that meeting with characteristic directness. Imposter syndrome is a luxury you can't afford anymore, Lucas. You're good at this work. You've earned your place here. Start acting like it. Her words echoed in his head as October brought its own set of challenges. The Hartman project had evolved into a long-term client relationship, and Lucas was managing increasingly complex coordination efforts. The work was demanding but satisfying, each successfully completed milestone building his confidence that he could actually handle this level of responsibility. Maya's dance classes had started in September, and Lucas tried never to miss the observation window at the end of each session. Watching his daughter learn pirouettes and pliés, her face bright with concentration and joy, felt like victory in its purest form. This was what all the struggle had been for, giving Maya a childhood that included things like dance lessons and birthday parties, and the security to just be a kid. The annual Sterling and Associates family picnic that Karen had mentioned arrived on a perfect October Saturday. Lucas had been nervous about attending, uncertain about socializing with colleagues outside the office context. But Maya had been excited about the promised bounce houses and face painting, so they'd shown up. The company had rented out a section of the regional park, complete with catered food, games, and activities for kids of all ages. Lucas recognized several colleagues and their families, including Mark Weber from the Hartman project team. "Lucas! Glad you made it." Mark waved them over to where he was manning the grill. "And this must be Maya. Karen's told me all about you. Apparently you and Sophie are thick as thieves at school." Maya nodded enthusiastically. "We sit together at lunch every day. Is Sophie here?" "Over by the bounce house with her mom. Go find her." Maya took off running, and Lucas found himself drawn into easy conversation with Mark and several other parents. The social anxiety he'd anticipated never materialized. These were just people, colleagues who also had kids and mortgages and lives outside the office. The playing field felt surprisingly level. Emily arrived late with her father, both of them looking more relaxed than Lucas had ever seen them at work. Richard worked the crowd with practiced ease, but there was genuine warmth in his interactions. This wasn't corporate networking. It was a man who genuinely cared about the people who worked for him. "Lucas." Richard approached with 2 bottles of water, offering one. "Beautiful day for this. Your daughter seems to be having a good time." Lucas followed his gaze to where Maya was playing tag with a group of kids, her laughter carrying across the park. "She is. Thank you for putting this event together. It means a lot to the families." "Emily's idea, actually. She convinced me 5 years ago that we needed to do more to acknowledge that our employees have lives outside work." Richard smiled. "She's usually right about these things, even when I'm initially skeptical." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the organized chaos of kids and adults enjoying a perfect autumn afternoon. "I wanted to thank you," Richard said finally. "Not for your work, though that's been excellent, but for what you did for Emily, for stopping that day when no one else would." "I didn't do anything extraordinary, just helped someone who needed it. That's exactly my point. It should have been ordinary, should have been what any decent person would do, but it wasn't. You were the only one." Richard's expression was serious. "Emily was drowning, Lucas. in expectations and pressure and the weight of trying to prove herself worthy of a name she never asked for. I didn't see it until it was almost too late. You saw it in 5 minutes and responded with compassion instead of indifference. Lucas didn't know what to say to that. The moment at the crosswalk felt like a lifetime ago, a sliding door moment that had altered everything that came after. How is she doing? Really doing? Better, much better. She set boundaries, delegated responsibilities, started actually enjoying her work again instead of treating it like a gauntlet she has to survive. Richard looked at his daughter, who was laughing at something Jennifer had said. She seems lighter, like she remembered how to breathe. I'm glad. She deserves to be happy. So do you, Lucas. I hope you're starting to believe that. The comment caught Lucas off guard, but before he could respond, Maya came running up, her face painted like a butterfly, and her words tumbling out in excited streams about the bounce house and the games. And could they please stay until the end because there was going to be a talent show? Richard excused himself with a knowing smile, and Lucas spent the rest of the afternoon being fully present with his daughter. They played games, ate too much picnic food, and watched the talent show where several brave employees performed everything from magic tricks to acoustic guitar. Emily sang, her voice clear and lovely on a folk song Lucas didn't recognize, and received enthusiastic applause. As the sun started setting and families began packing up, Lucas helped break down tables and chairs alongside other volunteers. The sense of community, of belonging to something larger than just a job, settled into his chest with unexpected warmth. You look happy, Emily said, appearing beside him with a trash bag. I am happy. That's still kind of strange to say out loud. Get used to it. You've built a good life, Lucas, for yourself and for Maya. Couldn't have done it without that crosswalk moment. Emily was quiet for a moment, helping him fold a table. You know what I think? I think the crosswalk just accelerated what would have happened eventually anyway. Someone with your character and work ethic would have found a way forward. Maybe it would have taken longer, been harder, but you would have made it. You give me too much credit. And you don't give yourself enough. She smiled. But you're learning. I can see it. You're starting to believe you belong here. She was right. The constant background anxiety about being exposed as inadequate had faded to occasional whispers rather than constant screaming. Lucas was starting to trust that his presence at Sterling and Associates was legitimate, earned through actual merit rather than charitable impulse. November brought its own milestones. Lucas successfully coordinated a major consulting proposal that landed a 6-figure contract. Patricia promoted him to lead senior coordinator, with 2 junior coordinators reporting directly to him. The leadership development program he'd helped design was approved for January launch, with Lucas confirmed as a mentor. Each success built on the previous one, creating momentum that felt both exhilarating and sustainable. Lucas was working hard but not desperately, achieving results without sacrificing his health or his relationship with Maya. The balance Patricia had pushed him toward was finally starting to feel natural. Thanksgiving arrived with an unexpected invitation. Emily called on the Tuesday before the holiday, her tone slightly uncertain. I know this might be weird, but my father is hosting Thanksgiving at his house, and he asked me to invite you and Maya. Very casual, just family and a few close colleagues. No pressure if you have other plans. Lucas's first instinct was to decline. Thanksgiving with the CEO felt like crossing some invisible professional boundary, but Maya had overheard the conversation and was already tugging his sleeve with excited whispers about, "Is that Emily? Are we invited somewhere for Thanksgiving?" "Can I think about it and call you back?" Lucas asked. Of course, no obligation at all, just wanted to extend the offer. After hanging up, Lucas looked at Maya's hopeful face and realized his hesitation was about his own discomfort rather than any legitimate concern. Richard Carter had been nothing but supportive and genuine in every interaction. Emily had become something close to a real friend, and Maya deserved to experience the kind of family holiday celebration they hadn't been able to have since Sarah died. He called Emily back within the hour. "We'd love to come. Thank you for including us." Thanksgiving Day was unexpectedly wonderful. Richard's home was beautiful, but not ostentatiously so, warm and welcoming rather than intimidating. The guest list was small: Jennifer and her husband, Patricia and her partner, Emily, and a few other Sterling and Associates employees Lucas recognized. Everyone brought dishes, and the atmosphere was relaxed and genuine. Maya charmed everyone, especially Richard, who engaged her in serious conversation about second grade and dance classes, and her opinions on various important topics. Watching his daughter interact confidently with these successful, powerful people, Lucas felt something shift in his chest. This was her normal now. She was growing up in a world where she felt safe and valued and included. The transformation from where they'd been a year ago was staggering. After dinner, while Maya played board games with some of the other guests' kids, Lucas found himself on the back patio with Richard and Emily, drinking coffee and watching the late autumn sunset. "I've been thinking about something," Richard said, his tone thoughtful rather than businesslike. "About the way we talk about success and merit in corporate contexts. We act like achievement exists in a vacuum, like some people just work harder or want it more. But the truth is, opportunity is distributed unevenly. Some people get chances because of their background or connections. Others never get those chances no matter how hard they work. That's what the Leadership Development Program is trying to address," Emily said, "creating pathways for people who might not otherwise get considered. It's a start, but I think we need to go further." Richard looked at Lucas. "You've made me rethink our entire approach to talent development, not just in terms of who we hire, but how we support them once they're here. How we create environments where people can thrive without sacrificing their humanity." "I'm just one example," Lucas said, "and an unusual one at that. You're proof of concept, evidence that there are talented people everywhere who just need someone to take a chance on them, to see their potential instead of just their credentials." Richard set down his coffee cup. "I'm planning to propose a major initiative to the board in January, expanding our recruitment to focus on character and potential rather than traditional markers of success, building support structures for employees who might need additional development, changing our entire culture to value the things you represent: integrity, resilience, authentic dedication." Lucas felt the weight of that statement. Richard Carter was talking about reshaping company policy based partly on Lucas's experience. The responsibility was enormous. "That's a lot of pressure to put on one hiring decision," he said quietly. "It's not pressure. It's possibility." Emily leaned forward. "You're not responsible for validating this approach, Lucas. You're just the catalyst that helped us see what we should have been doing all along." The conversation shifted to other topics, but Lucas carried Richard's words with him through the rest of the evening. By the time he and Maya headed home, the sun long set and Maya drowsy in the car Richard had insisted on calling for them, Lucas was processing layers of meaning he couldn't quite articulate. December brought the holiday season, and with it, another first. Lucas actually had money to buy real Christmas presents for Maya. Not just necessities disguised as gifts, but actual things she wanted: a bicycle, art supplies, books, and the sparkly dance outfit she'd been eyeing since September. He took her to see the holiday lights downtown, something they'd never been able to afford when bus fare and admission fees mattered. They drank hot chocolate and ate roasted chestnuts, and Maya's face glowed with wonder at the decorations. "This is the best Christmas ever," she declared, and Lucas felt his throat tighten with emotion. "It's pretty special," he agreed. "Do you think Mommy can see us? Do you think she knows we're okay now?" The question caught Lucas unprepared. They didn't talk about Sarah often, the grief still too raw even after 3 years. But Maya deserved an honest answer. "I think if she can see us, she's very proud of you, of the amazing, kind, brave person you're becoming. And proud of you too, for taking care of us and getting the good job and making everything better." Lucas pulled her close. "We took care of each other, sweetheart. That's what family does." Christmas morning was everything Lucas had hoped for. Maya's joy at her presence, the luxury of a real tree and actual decorations, the knowledge that they could afford this without sacrificing necessities. It all felt like a gift he'd been given after years of doing without. The new year arrived with its traditional promises of fresh starts and new possibilities. The Leadership Development Program launched in January with 8 participants, and Lucas found himself mentoring a young woman named Jordan, who'd been hired from a non-traditional background similar to his own. She was smart and hardworking, but constantly doubting whether she belonged, and Lucas recognized that anxiety intimately. "The first year is the hardest," he told her during one of their early mentoring sessions. "Not because the work is impossible, but because you're fighting against years of conditioning that tells you opportunities like this don't happen to people like us." "Does it get easier?" Jordan asked. It does, slowly. You start to trust that you earned your place here, that your presence is legitimate. Lucas smiled. I'm still working on it myself, honestly, but it's better than it was. February brought Lucas's one-year anniversary at Sterling and Associates. Patricia marked it with a performance review that was glowing, Jennifer sent a congratulatory email, and Emily took him to lunch at the Italian restaurant with the breadsticks that had become a family favorite. 1 year, Emily said, raising her glass of water and a toast. From Crosswalk to Cornerstone. That's gotta feel surreal. Every day I still expect someone to realize they made a mistake hiring me. And every day you prove that fear wrong by doing excellent work. Emily set down her glass. Lucas, I need to tell you something. I'm leaving Sterling and Associates. The announcement hit Lucas like cold water. What? Why? I'm starting my own consulting firm, smaller, focused on organizational culture and values-based leadership. Everything we've been developing here, but without the constraint of working within my father's company. Emily's expression was excited and nervous. I've been planning it for months. My father knows and supports it, and I wanted to ask if you'd consider joining me. Lucas stared at her, processing this information. Emily, I just hit my 1-year mark. I'm finally starting to feel stable. I'm not asking you to decide now. I won't launch until summer. But think about it. She leaned forward. You're talented, Lucas. You have insights about leadership and organizational culture that come from actually living through the challenges most consultants just theorize about. And you have integrity that's increasingly rare in this industry. I think we could build something meaningful together. I need to think about this. I know. I wouldn't expect anything less. Emily smiled. Just promise me you'll actually consider it instead of automatically saying no because it feels risky. Lucas promised, but the conversation dominated his thoughts for days. The opportunity Emily was offering was enormous. A chance to help build something from the ground up, to shape organizational culture for other companies based on the principles that had transformed his own life. But it was also terrifying. Leaving the stability he'd fought so hard to achieve felt like tempting fate. He talked it through with Patricia, who surprised him by being supportive. You've built strong skills here, Hale, and you're ready for bigger challenges than what your current role offers. Whether that's here or somewhere else, you need to keep growing. He talked it through with his therapist, unpacking the fear and possibility in equal measure. He talked it through with Maya, or tried to, though explaining job opportunities to a 7-year-old had its limitations. Would we have to move again? She asked, her face worried. No, sweetheart. We'd stay right here in our apartment. I'd just be working at a different company. Would you be happy? The question was so direct, so clear in its priorities that Lucas had to pause. Would he be happy? The work Emily was describing aligned with his values in ways that felt meaningful. The chance to help other people find the kind of opportunity he'd been given, to build systems that prioritize character over credentials, that felt important. I think I might be, he admitted. Then you should do it, Maya said with 7-year-old certainty. You're always telling me to try new things even when they're scary. The wisdom of children, Lucas thought, simple and devastatingly accurate. He took 2 weeks to think it through, weighing security against possibility, fear against potential. In the end, what decided him was remembering the crosswalk, the moment when he'd chosen compassion over opportunity and somehow found both. Sometimes the right choice required a leap of faith. Lucas called Emily on a Friday evening. I'm in. If you'll have me. I want to help you build this thing. The joy in her voice was unmistakable. Really? Lucas, that's amazing. We're going to do something meaningful here. I promise you won't regret this. I'm choosing to believe that, Lucas said. And he was. Choosing to trust that the path that had started at a crosswalk would continue to unfold in unexpected and meaningful ways. The months that followed were intense. Lucas continued his work at Sterling and Associates while helping Emily plan the new venture in evenings and weekends. Richard Carter was supportive, even offering initial funding and connections to potential clients. The transition was planned for July, giving Lucas time to complete his current projects and train his replacement. Patricia took the news with her characteristic straightforwardness. You're making the right choice for your development, Hale. Just don't forget what you learned here about sustainable work-life balance. Building a startup can consume you if you let it. The advice proved prophetic. The final months at Sterling and Associates were bittersweet, pride in what he'd accomplished mixed with anxiety about what came next. But Lucas had learned enough to recognize the difference between productive stress and destructive anxiety. He could handle this. June brought Maya's dance recital, and Lucas sat in the audience watching his daughter perform with confidence and joy. She'd grown so much in the past year, not just physically, but in self-assurance and happiness. The scared, uncertain child who'd clung to him in their cramped apartment had transformed into this bright, capable person who believed the world held good things for her. That transformation was worth every risk Lucas had taken and would take. July arrived, and Lucas's last day at Sterling and Associates felt momentous. The team threw him a small goodbye party, and colleagues he'd worked with over the past year offered genuine warmth and encouragement. Jennifer gave him advice about startup culture. Patricia told him she expected great things and to stay in touch. Richard Carter pulled him aside for a private conversation. "You've changed this company," Richard said, "not through some grand gesture, but through consistently demonstrating what real integrity looks like in professional contexts. People noticed, and they've started expecting better from themselves and each other." "I think you're giving me too much credit, and I think you still don't fully understand your own impact," Richard smiled. "But you will. And when you do, when you fully claim your worth, you're going to be unstoppable." Lucas left the building for the last time, feeling grateful and terrified in equal measure. He'd spent 15 months at Sterling and Associates, and they'd been the most transformative 15 months of his professional life. But it was time for the next chapter. Emily's firm, Carter Consulting Group, named deliberately to claim her identity on her own terms, officially launched in August. They started small, just Lucas and Emily working out of a shared office space, building their client base through Richard's connections and their own networking. The work was exhausting and exhilarating, every day bringing new challenges and small victories. Their first major client was a mid-sized tech company struggling with retention and culture issues. Lucas and Emily worked together to assess the situation, and what they found was familiar. Talented employees who felt undervalued, leadership that prioritized metrics over humanity, systems that accidentally punished the very behaviors they claimed to reward. It was everything Lucas had experienced in his years of temp work, and everything Sterling and Associates had taught him didn't have to be inevitable. They spent 3 months working with the company, implementing changes that seemed small but mattered enormously. Better communication structures, recognition systems that valued character alongside performance, pathways for advancement that didn't require traditional credentials. And most importantly, leadership training that emphasized empathy and integrity. The transformation wasn't immediate or total, but it was real. Employee satisfaction scores rose, retention improved, and the CEO sent them a testimonial that became the foundation of their marketing. More clients followed. Lucas and Emily developed a reputation for bringing genuine cultural change rather than just repackaging existing problems with new terminology. They hired 2 junior consultants in the spring, both from non-traditional backgrounds. The team was small but mighty, united by shared values rather than just shared employment. Maya turned 8 in June, 2 years after that crosswalk moment that had changed everything. Her birthday party, held in their apartment with a dozen friends from school and dance class, was joyful chaos. Lucas watched her blow out candles and make a wish, and felt overwhelming gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. That evening, after the guests had left and Maya was asleep, Lucas sat in the quiet of their living room and reflected on everything that had changed. 2 years ago, he'd been desperate and struggling, convinced that life would never be anything but survival mode. Now he had meaningful work, financial stability, and a daughter who was thriving. The path from there to here had started with a single choice at a crosswalk. A choice to stop when others kept walking. A choice that had cost him an interview and somehow, impossibly, led to everything good that followed. Lucas didn't believe in fairy tales or cosmic justice, but he believed in the compound interest of character, the way small choices made consistently accumulated into fundamental change. He believed in the possibility that doing the right thing might, occasionally, lead somewhere worth going. His phone buzzed with a text from Emily, a photo of their team celebrating landing another major client, everyone smiling and raising glasses in triumph. The message read, "We did it. Thank you for taking the leap." Lucas smiled and typed back, "Thank you for making it worth leaping for." He set down his phone and walked to Maya's room, standing in the doorway and watching her sleep. She looked peaceful and secure, dreaming whatever dreams came to happy children in safe homes. This was success, Lucas thought. Not the job title or the salary or the professional recognition, though those mattered. Real success was this: a child sleeping safely, a life built on principles that could withstand pressure, work that felt meaningful rather than just necessary. Real success was being able to look at himself in the mirror and recognize the person looking back. Someone who'd survived impossible circumstances without losing the core of who he was. Someone who'd been given a second chance and used it to build something genuine and sustainable. Someone who'd stopped at a crosswalk when everyone else walked on by and discovered that sometimes the most important destinations are the ones we never planned to reach. Lucas returned to the living room and opened his laptop. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new clients, new opportunities to help build organizational cultures that valued people over profit, character over credentials. But tonight, he allowed himself to simply be grateful. For Emily, who'd seen potential where others saw only credentials. For Richard, who'd been willing to rethink an entire hiring philosophy. For Patricia, who'd pushed him to believe in his own competence. For Maya, who'd given him reason to keep fighting when everything felt hopeless. And for that woman on the crosswalk 2 years ago, whose collapse had become the catalyst for everything good that followed. Life didn't owe Lucas anything. He knew that better than most. But it had given him this chance, this opportunity, this unexpected grace. And he was going to spend the rest of his life earning it, not through desperate striving, but through the steady accumulation of choices that reflected who he wanted to be. Choices like stopping for a stranger in crisis, like acknowledging weaknesses instead of hiding them, like taking risks that mattered even when they frightened him, like building a business based on values instead of just profit, like being present for his daughter even when work demanded his attention. The choices that defined a life weren't always dramatic. Mostly, they were small, made in moments when no one was watching, accumulated over years into something that looked like character. Lucas had made enough of those choices now to trust that he could keep making them. That the person he'd become through struggle and grace and unexpected second chances was someone worth being, someone who stopped at crosswalks, who saw people in crisis and chose compassion over convenience, who built a life on the foundation of integrity rather than calculation. It wasn't the life he'd planned. It was better than anything he could have imagined. And it had all started with one choice, one moment, one decision to be the person he needed to be regardless of the cost. Lucas closed his laptop and turned off the lights, heading to bed with a quiet sense of peace. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and opportunities. But tonight, he was exactly where he needed to be. A father who'd kept his promises. A professional who'd earned his place. A person who'd learned that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what really matters. And most importantly, someone who would always stop at the crosswalk when someone needed help. Because that's what defined him now. Not his job title or his salary or his professional success, but the fundamental certainty that character mattered more than convenience. That was the legacy he wanted to leave for Maya. That was the lesson he'd learned and would keep teaching. Sometimes the right choice costs you everything. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, it gives you back more than you ever dared to hope for. Lucas had been both lucky and brave, and he would spend the rest of his life being worthy of both.